Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. That guy's Brian. I'm Vince, and
My fault.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. This is IB After Dark. This is what you get, folks. It's been a long but wonderful day here in Northern Indiana, and we are going to talk about a lot of things, actually. Like, this is going to be a little bit different than normal, so I want to set that up for everybody. Obviously, this is upon further review. We jumped into the film today. We've got a lot to talk about from the offense and the defense and all of that fun stuff. Yes, no doubt that is coming. But the curveball, the audible for today, depending on what sports reference you want to use or sports analogy, our first segment normally is Brian's first reaction to the game, because he's not usually on the post-game show. But if you were with us yesterday afternoon, then you know that Brian was on the post-game show, and so he was able to give his thoughts, about the game and his gut reaction and all that fun stuff. So we don't have that segment. And so what we decided to do, because it sparked conversation between the two of us today when it went down, is Brian and I are going to talk about the AP poll and a little bit the coaches poll, but mostly the AP poll and what happened with Notre Dame today and what that means and what things look like and all of that kind of stuff. So we're going to break down the AP poll, basically, and what that means for college football playoff. What would it look like if the playoff were to start today? All of those kind of fun topics. And so that's going to be our first segment today, Brian. And it's going to be a little bit of fun, and then we'll jump into the film. Does that sound like a plan?
Sounds great to me, Mr. D'Addario. I'm just happy that you let me come along for the ride on my show. I appreciate that, man. I thank you so much.
It's what we do. There's always room for you on the hype train.
But it is interesting. I mean, the reason we're shifting it up a little bit is because I don't get surprised very often by what the national media does. I think I do a pretty good job of nailing how they're going to think and react to things. And I was shocked. Yeah. Shocked by the rankings. But the reason we're talking about it in the upon further review is because I think a big part of it is, I know what the spin is about the rankings jump, but I think a big part of it was yesterday's performance. And I'll explain why I think that is once we get rocking and rolling.
So let's just jump right into it, Brian. AP poll came out today. This is Sunday, October 27th. AP poll came out this afternoon. And specifically, Notre Dame was ranked 8th, up from 12. So up 4 spots from last week to this week after, their 51-14 win over Navy. And a lot of movement, from like 5 to 16. There's a lot of movement kind of in that neighborhood. Obviously nothing really at the top. There wasn't a bunch of, upsets or anything really at the top of the poll this weekend. But a lot of movement kind of like 4 through 16-ish, I would say. And so we're going to kind of break it down. We're going to talk about it. And I'm really kind of excited about it, Brian.
Yeah, me too. This is going to be fun, especially. And I'm in that weird, it's election season mode. And so I'm like looking at all these polls and everything. And then, the college football playoff thing comes out next Tuesday. Like I might have like a polls rankings overload next weekend, Vince. But like 1 through 4 didn't change in the AP poll.
Correct.
4, 5, and 6 flipped. So Miami jumped Texas. And then 7 was the same.
After so really that, 8. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
After that, from up and down to 20, so from 8 to 21, nobody stayed the same except for Indiana.
Right.
Although Indiana did gain votes, like they're closer to moving up than they were. So I was fascinated by all that movement, Vince, because a lot of it, like Clemson dropped 2 spots and didn't play. Iowa State dropped a spot and didn't play. Obviously, LSU dropped 8 spots. K-State dropped a spot with a win because it was an ugly win over a bad team. Ole Miss dropped a spot despite, I believe, a double-digit but ugly win over
12-point win over Oklahoma, yeah.
Right. Army stayed the same. And then actually, I'm wrong. Not to 22. From 8 to the end, Indiana's the only same because only same. Washington State jumped in at 22. They were out. Colorado jumped in at 23. I called on Thursday that if they beat Cincinnati that I could see them jump to the top 25. They did. And then Illinois and Missouri round out the top 25. Vanderbilt dropped out, which I don't necessarily agree with. And then Navy
right?
Out because of how badly they lost Notre Dame, which I understand. And I don't have a problem with the AP dropping Navy out. I have a problem with the coaches poll dropping Navy out and putting Memphis in. That's the issue that I had with the coaches poll. But
yeah, they beat Memphis and they beat them, by
convincingly.
scores.
Yeah, 12 points. And it was like Memphis kind of made it close late, but not really. And Memphis does, Memphis's best win is, I think, over North Texas, and Navy's best win is over Memphis. But I was really surprised, Vince, at the reaction to Notre Dame's victory from a ranking standpoint. Because, like, when the coaches poll came out, they were 9. So they went from 11 to 9. I was all right, cool. Like that's an expected jump. I was like, but the AP is probably going to have 10 or 11 because the coaches poll has been, for the most part, higher on Notre Dame this year. Not by a ton, but like a spot or two. Most of the year, Notre Dame was 11 in the coaches poll last week, and they were 12 in the AP poll. And then you get up to it, this week, and Notre Dame goes up 2. So I'm thinking, okay, they'll probably go up a spot or 2 in the AP poll. That's why I was thinking 11 or 10.
Yeah.
And then they come out and the AP poll has them at 8. Now they're closer to 9 than they are to 7. They're 5 points ahead of BYU, and they're 81 points behind Tennessee, which, if you look at the rankings, is not that bad. I mean, because Tennessee's going to have to play at least one team ranked ahead of them both right now, which is Georgia. And if Tennessee beats Georgia, then Notre Dame will be ahead of Georgia. Georgia, just
Correct.
like Bama, if Georgia loses another one, they'll fall a decent number of spots. So I think there's twofold. So if you look at all the movement, Vince, it was a lot of movement, but there wasn't a ton of teams moving a lot. Sometimes it does that. I think I'm muting myself, and then it won't let me mute, and then you guys hear me clear my throat, so I apologize. Clean that. You can take that out of there later, Vince, when you're editing. But so you had Clemson dropping 2 spots, Iowa State down 2, BYU went up 2. They're now ahead of Iowa State, which is what they should be ahead of Iowa State. Bama went up 1, Boise went up 2. LSU dropped 8 because they got beat by 12. K-State dropped 1, Pitt went up 1, Ole Miss went down 1, SMU went up 2, Army went up 2, Illinois dropped 4, Missouri dropped 4. So there's a lot of small little jumps in there. But Notre Dame went up 4, and Texas A&M went up 4, which were the 2 highest jumps of the week.
Yeah.
And I think to a degree that plays together. If you're going to jump up A&M 4, then you've got to remember, by the way, this Notre Dame team beat this Texas A&M team by 10 at their place, right? Same place that they just beat LSU. And you say, well, they're a different team now. Well, then you can't hold Notre Dame's loss to Northern Illinois against them if you're going to say, well, it's a different team now because, okay, well, Notre Dame's a different team. And you can't say, well, we're going to discount this loss at the beginning of the season, but we're not going to discount this loss at the beginning of the season. So I think that's part of it. So obviously Texas A&M going up from 14 to 10 with their 15-point win, over LSU. Then I think that's going to naturally give Notre Dame a boost. But I also think that, and I could be wrong, I'm just reading this, I think there was also some genuine, okay, I might be wrong about this Notre Dame team after the game on Saturday, because there was a lot of people in the media, the national media, writers and analysts, that viewed Navy as a top 25 team. That's why they were voted in as a top 25 team.
Sure.
But, they knew that it was away from home for Notre Dame, and there was a lot of people that picked Notre Dame to win. Or Notre Dame to lose. Joel Klatt picked Notre Dame to lose, and I know he wasn't alone. And there was a lot of people that picked Notre Dame to win, or they didn't pick at all, that were kind of like, hey, I think it's going to be a game. I think it's going to be a competitive game.
A competitive game, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. And heck, I even kind of somewhat had it competitive. I had it as 11-point game for 11-point win for Notre Dame, which meant I didn't have them covering. And I believe I'm the only one of the IB analysts that didn't have them covering, if I remember correctly. If you go back and look at the rankings, I know you had them winning, I think, by 17.
Yeah, it was the 31-17. So
right. 14. So you had them covering, but
barely.
Not by a ton, because we liked. Look, the reality is, Vince, you and I and all the team at Irish Breakdown, we have a lot of respect for this Navy football team because they're a good football team. Notre Dame made them not look like one, but Notre Dame's had a tendency to doing that in the past. So if you look at that, and then Trevor had, I think, 30, you had 31-17, Stiers had 38-20, Trevor had it 34-17, Nick had it 35-17, Andrew McDonough had it 34-17. I mean, we were all kind of close. Joe Everett had it 35-28. So actually, Joe also had it a much more competitive game, but he was even closer than I was. I didn't think it'd be all that close. And I also said in our show that part of me wanted to predict it to be an even bigger blowout. So I think a lot of the pollsters, Vince, were hopefully, maybe I'm giving them too much credit, but I think a lot of them were intellectually honest and looked at that Notre Dame victory and said, hey, this is maybe we were wrong about Notre Dame. You know, maybe this Notre Dame team is a little bit better than we thought it was, and ranked them appropriately. I think that had a big say. That had a big say in my opinion, in why they went up the rankings.
Yeah, I was shocked, to be honest with you, when I pulled that up, because I didn't think that they would be in the single digits again after the Navy. Because here's what I thought would happen, to be perfectly honest with you. Now, I do think the Texas A&M win over LSU did help a degree. I think that was part of it. But I figured we would get the same thought process that usually happens when Navy's a pretty good to decent team, is that, well, they might lose to Navy, but then when they actually do win and win convincingly, it was Navy. Like, you're supposed to do that. It was Navy. You know what I mean? Like, they would totally talk out of both sides of their mouths. And I say they by the media and the people who vote on the AP poll, right? The Associated Press people. I mean, I just figured they'd be like, well, it's Navy. They should do that, regardless of. But now the point that you made to me, which I think was a really, really good one, was that the AP had Navy ranked. So you have to give respect to Notre Dame for beating a ranked team, because you had them ranked. Like, right. I mean, you can't really talk out of both sides of your mouth when you're the one that said that Navy was really good, and then Notre Dame did that to Navy. You can't be like, well, it's just Navy, because most of the time Navy's not ranked, right? I mean, it's been 5 years since they played against each other and they were both ranked, and Notre Dame
and the number of games they've
in that
played
game too
in history where they were both ranked is
it's minuscule. I mean, it's not a large number.
It's a very small.
It's not a large number. So, you know, they almost had their hands tied behind their back a little bit when it came to this ranking, because Notre Dame beat a team that they had already ranked, and they beat them 51-14. And to be honest with you, Navy didn't look good. And we talked about that in the post-game show. And, you know, even the announcers kind of talk, which they're not wrong. Navy played their worst game that they've played all year. They did. But Notre Dame had a hand in that. You know what I mean? Like,
it's like that's where you get all these teams that don't turn the ball over very much, and then they just, like, Louisville came into that game and hadn't turned the ball over all year, not once all year, and they turned it over multiple times against Notre Dame. And it's just like, it's a coincidence, I'm sure, you know. But you know, I'm a little bit of sarcasm in that comment, but. Yeah, I think part of the issue that some of us have, and I'll be honest, is we tend to allow ourselves to get skewed by what the national, like, ESPN says. And then we listen to the broadcasters run their mouths the whole game about Notre Dame and Navy and blah, blah, blah. And then we hear the stupid analysts. And, like, there's this guy that does college. His name's, I think, Matt Berry. He's the worst. His analysis, so it's not even surface level, Vince. Like, it would be an improvement if his analysis was surface level. And you just see some stuff and you're like, yeah, that's how, but not everybody thinks that way. And like, I know, I'll be honest, like, I know an AP voter. Well, obviously, we both know Eric Hansen, but I know there's a guy named Dylan Sin who writes for the Fort Wayne newspaper. Really nice kid. You and I both know Dylan. And I don't often agree with Dylan's rankings, as I probably wouldn't agree with yours and mine completely if we both did rankings. But what I like about Dylan is I know for a fact that Dylan puts a lot of thought into his rankings. He does it because he wants to be right how he sees it. And like, he's not alone. I know he's not alone. There's some people that are just total clowns, and they say things to get noticed or, you know, whatever. Like, you know, there was one guy last week that had, you know, Notre Dame 20th, and like, it's just, there were some really bizarre rankings, and we'll just leave it at that, right? But
so those
I
get
do
think
there's they do. Like you and I both know Eric Hansen. Mm-hmm. Whatever our feelings may or may not be about Eric Hansen, I think both of us would say that I think when Eric Hansen puts the rankings together, that he's giving you, in his opinion, his legitimate, this is what I truly believe, top 25. Whether I think, hey, I think he's wrong here, I think he's wrong there, I disagree with this there, he disagree with mine. I think he's giving you an honest analysis of the rankings. And I do think there's a lot of people like that because, as you said, they are published, they are out there, and they also know that if they get something egregiously wrong, that they're going to hear about it. Now, some people feed on that, and that's why I think they do certain things, is because they know that they're going to get, that they're going to get attention, and some people just,
Yep. That's all
they feast on that. So, so that's kind of where I'm at, Vince. I was surprised to see Notre Dame make such a jump. That's really what it boils down to. I really did not expect Notre Dame to make the leap that they made. I mean, they went from 12 to 8, but they also went up over 100 points on the week. They went from 891 points to 1,000 points in one game against Navy. And like I said, I think the fact that they did view Navy respectfully gave into why I think they felt it wasn't just that Notre Dame won.
Sure.
And anyone that actually watched that game is going to look at that and be like, yeah, Navy made mistakes, part of it for Notre Dame, but Notre Dame had 302 yards of offense at the half. Right. Notre Dame was on pace for over 600 yards of offense. And so it's not like they recovered a bunch of short field fumbles and turned them into points, and they didn't do a whole lot other than that. Notre Dame was on pace for over 600 yards, and if they didn't yank their starters, basically after one drive of the third quarter, that's exactly what the offense would have done. They were not going to be stopped by Navy. And so I was pleasantly surprised with that, Victor. Now, I would argue that I still think they need to be at least a spot higher, if not 2 spots higher.
And I'm where you think they should be now, or
yes, and I'll make that case when I do my rankings for the college football playoff projections, because again, I know that they have a worse loss than Tennessee and Texas, but Notre Dame has significantly better wins, in my opinion, than Texas, and they have a better win than Tennessee. Because well, hold on a second now. Tennessee beat Alabama. Well, Alabama's ranked 14th and A&M's ranked 10th. Tennessee beat Alabama at home, Tennessee beat Alabama at home. Notre Dame beat A&M on the road. So got a road win compared to your best win being at home, and you got yours against a team ranked higher. So, and I think there's after that you look at Tennessee's record and like, but what's the other good wins they have? That's my case. But I'm not like gonna pound it like, I can't believe Tennessee's ahead of Notre Dame. Can't believe Texas is ahead of Notre Dame. I'm not gonna say that because some of Notre Dame's wins early in the season weren't overly impressive with how they played.
Sure.
So that's kind of where I'm at. But I'm okay with 8th. I would simply argue that they can go up a couple. But I was surprised they went up the way and especially since they leaped. So the reason they got from 12 to 8, Vince, is they obviously went past LSU, who fell out.
Right.
And then they also leaped BYU, who's undefeated and won Saturday, convincingly went on the road and beat UCF. That surprised me a little bit. And I think that's partly because BYU's still not getting any respect. I think that's honestly part of it.
I don't think argue, Big 12 is getting much respect, period.
And to a degree, it shouldn't. But I think BYU's got some impressive wins. And I think they've looked like a good football team. If I was doing it, I would jump Notre Dame ahead of Tennessee, but I would also make an argument that you should have BYU ahead of Notre Dame, which would leave Notre Dame still at 8. Right? But they also leaped Clemson and Iowa State,
right,
who were both idle. And so Clemson fell to about where they should be, because again, Clemson has no good
Clemson
wins.
Was way too high last week.
Yes, like I'll give you some data, Vince. So I'm putting this rankings together, and the way that I'm doing a college football playoff projection. So I put a poll up at Irish Breakdown, and ask people, hey, would you want this kind of thing of me giving you my projections? Because I think it's so lazy. The projection now is like, this is based off where things stand today. Well, anyone can do that. I can just look at the AP freaking poll and do that. You know what I mean?
I did it this afternoon.
Right. It means you did. It means nothing. I'm going to project where I think things are going to go. So if two teams play each other, I'm not going to leave them where they're ranked right now. I'm going to do some level of projection of that game. But the things I look at is I look at the overall win percentage of your opponents and the overall record of your opponents, and then also what is the winning record and the winning percentage of the teams that you've beat. And then I also look at the number of wins over top 20 over teams that are above 500. And then I also look at like the Sagarin rankings, the FEI, which hasn't come out yet, the FPI, and those type of things. So when you look at Notre Dame right now, they have 7 wins over teams with records above 500. Ohio State has 4, A&M has 4, Texas has 4, Bama has 5. So that resume for Notre Dame is impressive. They're also 6th on the Sagarin rankings, and they're 5th on the FPI. And I think there's some people coming around to, hey, the computers like Notre Dame a lot. Why is that? And I think that's part of this data too, is people are looking at the numbers and being like, okay, this Notre Dame team, maybe they're better than we think. And then when you start looking at their resume and you start looking at the teams they've beat, Vince, it's like, okay, sure, they haven't beat teams impressively. I mean, they haven't beat a lot of great teams. They have 3 wins over teams that were ranked. But it's also the fact that they're getting to the point now where it's like they're not even playing competitive games anymore. You know what I mean, Vince? So, like, since the Northern Illinois loss, they've won games by 59, 25, 42, 18, and 37. And then they have a 7-point win in which they led for, it was like over 52 minutes and had a double-digit lead for over half the game. So their game control against Louisville was impressive. And so you're like, you start looking at this and you're like, only one team scored above 16 points on that defense. Wow. And I think that might be the thing that maybe woke people up the most is this defense is legit.
Well, yeah.
And the offense is waking up. Like in this last 3 games, and this thing we talked about, Vince, in their last 3 games, Notre Dame is averaging as a team is averaging 43.7 points per game in its last 3 games. And if you add the Louisville game in there and make it the last 4 games, they're averaging 40.5 points per game. And I think people are starting to recognize that and be like, wow, this team actually is a little better than we think. And you're even seeing some Notre Dame fans that I have been down on this team starting to slowly come around to that reality as well. And I think yesterday's impressive win was a big reason for that, in my opinion. It's not the only one, but it's a big reason for that.
Well, and they're and just to your point about the defense, in that 3-game stretch, they're giving up just a shade over 10 points a game in that 3-game stretch. So not only are they scoring over 40, they're giving up just over 10. Like it's like 10.1 or something like that, or 10 point. It's 10 point something. You know what I mean? So to your point, they're scoring a ton of points. They're not allowing any points, and they're looking good while they do it. And I think, let's see, how often did the second team play the entire 4th quarter as well in those games? You know what I mean? Like,
so in the last 3 games, somebody was trying to spin some stats the other day. He's like, well, I mean, we don't really have great passing attack. Riley Leonard's only threw for 178 yards. I was like, he played 1 possession of the 3rd quarter, and that's it. Right? He had 141 at halftime. But in their last 3 games
of that possession,
right, in their last 3 games, Riley Leonard has not played in the 4th quarter of 2 of those 3 games.
Right.
So, yeah. And your starters primarily. So, Vince, in the period that I was talking about, the last 4 games, Notre Dame's given up 14.5 points per game. If you go at the last 6 games, that's where the number you were referring to comes into play. It's 11, I think it's up to 11.3 because of the Navy game. It was 10.6 coming into the Navy game. It's up to 11.3.
Okay, I was just doing
11
point.
No,
I was just doing the last 3 games. Even
yeah. The last because
they gave it up 7, 13,
divided by 3, 11.3.
Okay.
So, 7 plus 13 plus 14 is 34 points divided by 3. It's 11.3. The point is, Vince, 10.6, 11.3. It's really good. You know what, Vince? What I think you did is here. Hold on a second. So this is actually where I think if you look at what they've scored against the first team defense, they've only given up 9.3 points per game because both Georgia Tech and Georgia Tech scored a touchdown on Notre Dame's second team defense.
Right.
So
you take 7 points out of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is offense is scoring, defense isn't. And Notre Dame has leapt into the top 10 in the AP poll, which is obviously where they belong. We can talk about whether they belong at 8, 7, 6, whatever. But the jump from 12 to 8 was surprising. It was surprising based on the narratives that are out there and that we usually hear when it comes to Notre Dame, and when it comes to Notre Dame versus Navy as well. And just one more piece of this too, Brian. We're talking about teams that are idle. We were talking about Clemson and Iowa State, and how they dropped while they were idle. But guess who went up 2 spots when they were idle? Army. Yeah. They went up 2 slots as an idle team last week. So from 23 to 21. And if I'm not mistaken, and I just want to pull it up here so I have it in front of me. They're off, obviously, yesterday. Then they've got the Air Force. And Air Force I think they've got 1 win this year.
So 1-6.
That should be a win. And then they've got North Texas, which is 5-3. So that'll be a game for sure.
2 back-to-back competitive losses to good football teams, by the way.
Yep. And that's at
Lost
North
to Memphis
Texas,
by 8 and Tulane by 8.
So that's on the road. And then they have another bye week, and then they've got Notre Dame. So I would say the chances of Army being a top 20 team, if they go 2-0 over the next 2 weeks, they're going to be a top 20 team.
Yeah, the North Texas game is going to be the one to watch.
Oh, absolutely.
Because that's a team that can score. The North Texas can score a little bit, and that always they're averaging 40 points per game. The problem is North Texas has given up 36.9 points per game.
And there's your
their rush defense has given up 177 yards per game. So again, they can get into a shootout with you just like Memphis did. With Navy.
Sure.
So anyway, I somebody in the chat said, "Sorry, Vince, I don't think the playoff committee will give Notre Dame any credit for beating Army." This is where some of you need to get out of your emotions.
I disagree.
And look at and stop assuming that the committee is going to look at these teams the same way that you do. Just because you don't respect the service academies doesn't mean that the committee's not going to look at them and rank them. And the reality is, if the playoff committee, we don't know that they will, but if the playoff committee puts Army in its top 25, and I don't know that they will, Vince, because as I've argued, Army hasn't played anybody.
Agreed.
Like the whole Navy hasn't played anybody. That was a myth because they beat Memphis, who now is in the coaches poll top 25 and is 7-1. Army has not played anybody. And I don't know that Army is going to be in the top 25. But if they do, then clearly the committee is going to give Notre Dame credit for beating them. That's nonsense to think that they won't. Here's the other thing you're not giving enough thought to with that type of. I just think it's a I don't want to say shallow because I don't mean that disrespectfully.
It's just short-sighted.
Yes, it's narrow-minded is a way of looking at it, is because you're just looking at the name. And if you're going to say that, then okay, well then are we going to give Notre Dame extra credit for beating USC even if they're not good? You know what I mean? So it's just there's his response is even more emotional than the first one. It's like, look,
I don't even have it open,
it's probably best. The reality is that the committee will absolutely give them credit for a ranked team that they beat. And that's the other thing, is Notre Dame's going to need Navy to keep winning as well.
Sure.
And because they were only like 4th, 3rd, and 5th in the others receiving votes. They didn't completely fall off the radar.
They're 29.
So anyway, Vince, and so why does all this matter? Well, I think it matters is because it gives you a little bit of a glimpse into what people outside of Notre Dame think about the Notre Dame team. Some people on the committee will view things similarly to the voters. Some won't. But it also is a perception thing. I keep saying this. It's a perception thing. And when you look at a game like, wow, that team's ranked and that team's ranked, and you look at the box score and you're like, that team was dominant over that team. And you look at the final score and you say, it's going to matter. Plus, there's a perception of how Notre Dame is viewed. All of a sudden, you're talking to recruits. They're all of a sudden, Notre Dame's back into being a top 10 football team. You know, Alabama's this, Alabama that. Well, right now, Notre Dame's ranked well ahead of Alabama. Those things matter. Those things matter. So anyway, Vince, I just thought that was a very interesting thing to look at. It's going to be interesting, obviously, what the playoff committee does. But the playoff committee, and this is where I also think there's some shallow thought here, is that the playoff committee has always been more positive on Notre Dame than the voters, the AP and the coaches.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Always.
Wholeheartedly. Yep.
And so if they're viewing Notre Dame 8th and 9th, then where would the committee view Notre Dame? And that's what's going to make it very interesting. Very interesting.
The fun part is Notre Dame's going to be idle, obviously, next week. And then the rankings come out on Tuesday. And so, what happens during the week that Notre Dame's idle?
Yeah.
Eating cheeseburgers, as Charlie Weiss would say. Like, what happens then?
Not eating cheeseburgers. Well, and you look at the games next week, let's look at what's on the docket for next week. Number 3, Penn State plays number 4, Ohio State. If Penn State beats Ohio State, Notre Dame will leap Ohio State and should leap Ohio State. Because then what's the win that Ohio State's banking their resume on at this point in time? They've played 2 good teams and got beat by both of them.
Correct.
If Ohio State beats Penn State, I think Penn State probably stays ahead of Notre Dame, even though their resume isn't overly impressive either. But I do think Penn State at least would have a couple quality wins and a perceived much better loss. Well, it wouldn't be perceived. It would be a much better loss. If Ohio State blows Penn State out, which I don't see happening, at least based on what they played today, then that'll have an impact on it. So you have that matchup. Duke plays at number 5 Miami. That's not going to have any impact. Michigan hosts Oregon. That's not going to. Yeah.
I kind of hope I said this to you earlier today. I kind of hope Miami wins out at this point. Because they're going to be. They'll be the dominant team in the ACC, and everybody. And there's going to be a chasm between them and everybody else. And then, honestly, at that point, Miami might be the only ACC bid. The ACC and the Big 12 have a chance of being a one-team.
Yeah,
at this point,
if Clemson wins out and Miami beats them, I still think Clemson's in at 11-2.
Okay,
they would need Clemson to lose again. Speaking of, Clemson hosts Louisville this weekend.
Right, and there you go.
So that'll be an interesting one, But then again, if Clemson loses to Louisville and then goes and beats Miami, now you've got 2 teams in. So I still think the ACC right now is on track for 2 teams. Plus, you got Pitt, who's undefeated. We'll see what they do. But their computer rankings, the hard part of their schedule
coming up.
And they're like, you look at some of this, like the FPI and the Sagarin rankings. Pitt is not great on either. They're 26th in the Sagarin and they're 32nd in the FPI. Notre Dame is 6th and 5th. In those rankings. So
and Pitt's playing SMU at SMU, by the way,
right?
Saturday night. So that's going to be a tough game too.
Yeah. And neither of those teams are going to jump ahead of Notre Dame unless they run the table. Tennessee hosts Kentucky; they're bad. So there probably won't be. Texas A&M at South Carolina should be interesting. I hope there's no letdown game for Texas A&M.
Going on the road winning should help them.
Yeah, Iowa State hosts Texas Tech. Texas Tech's been a gamey team this year at times. So not a lot of great action this weekend, to be honest with the events outside of the Penn State Ohio State game.
And that one's
to be honest,
like it's going to be right out of the gate.
That's one of only 2 ranked matchups all weekend. The other being Pitt and SMU.
Correct.
So not a great weekend of football. But the last time we had a not great weekend of football, I think Vanderbilt beat Alabama and Arkansas beat Tennessee, and you know what I mean.
Good point. No, good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
We'll see how it plays out.
This right now, I think Notre Dame is sitting in a very advantageous spot. They just need to continue doing what they are doing. I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? And so I'm just surprised that they are there today. I thought maybe it'd take another week to get them up to where they are now, but hey, take it where you can get it. And in 9 days, the AP poll is irrelevant. So I think that also comes into play here as well. I mean, it's the only poll that we have besides the coaches poll to discuss, and so that's what we're doing. But in 9 days, when the CFP rankings come out, the AP poll becomes completely irrelevant, and we're talking about the college football playoff poll. So
I cannot wait for that.
I know.
I cannot wait for that.
I know. And that's Tuesday evening, I do believe.
Weekend. That's going to be a weird day. I was shocked. I was like, isn't that election day?
It's election
day.
Then
I found out like all these people are voting early. I was like, when did that become a thing?
Yeah, that's not. No, I go on election day. That's we have a tradition in my house. We go. I take the kids. But I think actually my one kid might actually work the polls, so that's good. Get him involved. And
very nice.
So Tuesday, Sean actually pointed this out to me. Sean Stiers pointed this out to me. So you've got election day, you've got the rankings coming out, and it's the NFL trade deadline. So you got a lot of stuff going on
That's going to be a crazy day.
Yeah, right.
Crazy day.
Yeah, lots going on Tuesday. So, but as the kids would say, you got to buckle up. You got to buckle up. Here we go. Do the sign here. So that's going to do it for our AP poll talk. Thanks for hanging out with us. Make sure you hit the like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell, share with your family and friends. And of course, jump on the boards.irishbreakdown.com. Brian put a poll up. You could have voted in the poll if you were a member of the poll. Yeah. I'm just saying.
It was overwhelming victory for those who wanted me to do a playoff projection.
It's usually an overwhelming victory for when they want you to do more work. That's usually kind of how it works. But your work is displayed front and center on boards.irishbreakdown.com. So if you want to see it, you want to be a part of it, you got to get over there. So make sure you do that.
So much for only doing that for about 15 or 20 minutes, Vince.
Whenever you give me a time that we're going to be done with something, I usually double it in my head. It's just what we do. It's just how we roll. It's all good. So we're good. Let's get to upon further review, because we actually did watch the film. We actually do have things to talk about, and we're going to talk about the offense first. And we are going to revisit your keys to victory, as we always do on a Sunday evening after dark. And I would say, for the first time that I can remember, when we've been doing this upon further review show, and we've been doing the keys revisited, your first key is always the same for the offense, and it's start fast. And this might be the first time we've ever given this one a plus, because they finally
we've given them checks before.
We've given them checks, and we were great on a curve. At times it felt like a little bit, but like this time, I'm very confident that we can get a plus out there.
Yeah, we gave them a check for Purdue, but not a plus, because they had a couple, didn't score on a couple drives. And then Louisville, they started really well, and then kind of second quarter just kind of kerplunked a little bit. You know what I mean? Stanford was, I think that was a check, and it was pretty good, but you had the fumble, or not you had the fumble by Bo Collins. You had the penalty by Anthony Knapp that cost them a scoring drive. And so you kind of always looked at it a little bit like, all right, they're doing well, but like, you got to do better. This is the first time I'll definitely give them a plus, Vince, even though there was a moment there where I thought we were about to see them kind of do what they've done, which is just kind of, you start off well, you score your first two drives. I think their third drive, they punted, correct? And then Navy went down and scored, made it 14-7. And then their next drive, I believe that is when they went.
So they went touchdown, field goal attempt,
field goal miss,
touchdown.
Okay. Then the next possession, they scored. So then it was 21-7. And then it was the next drive that they punted. And you had the muff after 3 and out, and it started to get a little sloppy. And you're like, okay, you had your previous drive had a couple, iffy plays, and then you broke the big one. That play, you need to do a sprint out. You have a sprint out gain for 7. You have a drop by Jordan Faison. Your line gets blown up on the second drive. You throw a bubble. You throw a tunnel screen. Riley Leonard, it hits a guy right in the chest, and they punt, and you're like, here we go. Because you're looking at like Navy could spend the next 9 minutes with the ball and make it 21-14, and then you get the ball in the third quarter, and we're having a different conversation about this game. Then they had that mistake, and then the offense was like, cool, we got this. Yeah. And they really started to roll then.
And the fact that they took on that drive, Brian, they started obviously in plus territory. It was the Navy 40.
Yeah.
So they only had 40 yards to go, but they took 5 minutes off the clock. 4 minutes and 57 seconds in a 9-play, 40 yards. So, it was just a methodic.
And overcame a holding penalty on the first play of that post fumble. Right. You had a breakup. You get down to 3rd and 15, and it looks like, again, they're not going to get anything out of this. And then check down to Neas Williams, and then he has a great throw on 4th down, and then all of a sudden, boom, 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 touchdown.
Right.
And they just rolled from there.
Yes.
I mean, they weren't stopped. The only thing that stopped them really the rest of the time was the clock. I think they probably, if they would have had another minute on the clock on that final field goal drive, we might have seen them call things a little bit differently on that last drive. And then, of course, you have the first possession of third quarter, you score a touchdown, and then we don't see the offense anymore. Starting offense anymore. Like literally don't see the starting offense anymore. They didn't play anymore after that.
Right.
So yeah, I give this a plus. I give this a plus. And the other thing too, Vince, that factors into this too is the fact that, you know, you go up 14-0, Navy breaks off a big play, right? 47-yard touchdown. Yeah. It's 21-7. Again, you make a mistake and then you just, how are you going to handle this? And I felt like this Notre Dame team responded pretty well. And we always talk about a fast start's two things. Number one, it's about building confidence. They certainly did that. It's also about giving your defense a breather. And I think that when the offense came out, went score, turned that first turnover into a touchdown, I think the defense kind of breathed a sigh of relief as well. Like, okay, cool. Our offense came to play today. We don't have to put as much pressure on ourselves to, you know, bury this team.
Yeah. No, the starting offense had 8 drives in this game. Okay. They had 8 drives. They scored on 6 of them. And if the starting kicker played, they would have scored on 7 of them. Okay. So, and I realize, you know, ifs and buts are candy and nuts. I get all of that, but like a 36-yard field goal, Mitch Jeter hits a 36-yard field goal. Okay. So 8 drives, they score 7 times. Yes. The one drive where they punted was ugly. It was an ugly drive. I mean, I'm not going to debate that with you. It was an ugly drive, right? But when you have 8 drives and you score on 7 of them, or should have scored on 7 of them, ended up scoring on 6 of them, I think you get the plus for start fast. You know, I mean, that was, it's efficient. You're going down, you're scoring. That's what you want. And they also, in the midst of that, as you mentioned, they answered a touchdown with a touchdown. You know, like that felt, okay, Notre Dame's up 14-0. They break that one. It's 14-7. You're like, well, you know, I don't know, you know, about this. And then
it was a huge
momentum swing.
Drive, Vince.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes.
The 14-7, didn't they counter that with the 64-yard touchdown run, correct?
I believe so.
Yeah, because they had missed a field goal that could have made it 17-0. And then Navy went and scored and made it 14-7. And then Notre Dame ripped off the long run by Jeremiah Love to make it 21-7. So it's a great answer. It was great. Your defense gave up its first, like, okay, they gave up points, and then what do? You answer with a big
3 plays.
3 plays.
3 plays, big run. Yeah. I mean, and then it was like, okay. I mean, good. Hey, Navy, hey, great job getting that score. They didn't score again until the second half. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, the offense took over at that point, and things were peachy. So, and
they didn't really threaten the end zone after that either, Vince. I mean, they missed a field goal, but they didn't really threaten the end zone until the third quarter, first drive of the third quarter. By then it's 31-7 and it's ball game.
Yeah, 100%. Because I mean, if you look after that touchdown, their drives ended on their own 48, on the Notre Dame 23 when they had a field goal try and missed it. Their own 23, then they scored, but that was in the second half. You know, so et cetera, et cetera. So you're right. They did not threaten at that point.
Because like they were up big on Navy in 2022 and blew a big lead. It still won, but they were up 35-7 then. That's a 22-point swing. This is a 24-point swing. And this is a much better defense and a much better team than that 2022 team.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
So you 31-7, you're like, okay, it's over.
Correct. 100%. Yeah. You and I and our little group chat, we were talking about who the next quarterback was going to be for Notre Dame. You know what I mean? As far as like they need to start getting other people in. Like
halftime we're talking about when are they going to bring in the backup quarterback.
So,
I do think if Notre Dame would have stopped Navy on that first drive and forced a punt, I could have understood maybe them then giving Steve a series or with the starters. I would have understood that. But when they went down and scored, you needed to put your offense back. And I don't even know if they were considering that. I'm just giving you my opinion.
Yeah.
But a lot of that was built on Vince, this fast start. So plus. Yeah,
exactly. Plus no, it's absolutely a plus. Second key to victory on the offensive side was the run game must dominate. And I'll give you a second to explain it. So I'm not just reading it to people, but just, Cliff's Notes version, your explanation of the run game must dominate. Wow.
No, they actually, I give it a check. right?
Okay.
I give it a check, but not a plus. You got to give it a check. They ran for 270 yards, right? I mean, you
Sure.
can't not give it a check, although 50-something of those yards came when they put 21 in the game, and he racked up a lot, but they were still around 200 without him. I think Jeremiah had 103 yards, correct? Right, or 102. What was his total? 102?
Yeah, 102. He had 12 carries for 102
Okay.
yards, and then Leonard had
So
10 for 83.
right. So that's 185, just those two. And then you add in Jadarian Price, and you
He
have
had 19.
You have over 200 with those three guys. And then I believe at least two of Aeneas Williams carries were with the first team. He might have got one later, but
I don't know that he did, honestly. Maybe I'm wrong, but he was in a bunch with the first team.
They were over 200 before him.
Without him.
I don't think the run game dominated like, wow, they went for like it wasn't as impressive. And this is what's crazy about it. It wasn't as impressive of a performance as the numbers show, because a lot of Riley Leonard's run game production came in scrambles.
Correct.
So the run numbers look good. They ran for 265. The run numbers look good, but your two starting running backs had 121 rushing yards, and Riley Leonard probably had, 15, 20 yards on designed runs. So he didn't dominate with it, but you did what you needed to do with it, and you put the game away with it in the second half.
True.
And the way that Mike Denbrock is designing the offense right now, they're quote unquote scrambles, but they're built in. And a couple of his scrambles were on RPOs, which were literally run plays that he was going to pull and throw, didn't, and then he properly tucked it and ran. So it's a check. It wasn't a dominant offensive performance in the run game. And the final part of our show is actually going to be a breakdown of the offensive line. So I know, Vince, I think you said that at the beginning, but just a reminder. So we'll dive more into the offensive line when we break that down. So normally we do like, okay, here's some things we saw that were different, and then here's the key moments. And I kind of feel like we kind of nailed all that in yesterday's show.
Yeah.
So I wanted to really focus in on the offensive line and talk about the play of the offensive line.
Yep.
And so we'll do that in part 4. But they did their job. And when you can, and part of the breakdown of the offensive line, the point I was making is we'll explain why I think they were a bit limited in the overall success, because Navy basically said, you're not going to beat us running the football. You're going to have to beat us throwing the football. And Notre Dame did. So that they factored into it as well. But they still, even though the numbers weren't sexy, I mean, that 64-yard touchdown run was huge, Vince. And they were really good in short yardage, especially the running backs were really good in short yardage situations, where there was twice that Jeremiah Love got hit behind the sticks on a short yardage run, and he either got off of a tackle or ran a guy over and got the first down. So I thought that was all important factors in the game.
Key to victory number 3 is one that I think is important in many games, but Notre Dame has struggled with this throughout the season. And I don't think that's really even being hyperbolic. I think it's just true. The numbers don't lie, right? And it was third down efficiency. And it says right here, I'm reading what you wrote, and it says Notre Dame ranks 92nd nationally in third down offense. They weren't good in third down offense up to this point. They just weren't. And that was a key stat in this game, because they did have 13 third down opportunities in this game, and they converted 8 of them. So, if you even want to throw in fourth down, there were 1 of 1 in fourth down conversions. So 9 of 14.
One of the third downs that they didn't get, they still got a first down because that third down. Yeah. And the play was designed. There was 2 short throws that he could have gone with. There was a cross to Bo Collins he could have hit, and then there's the check down to Aeneas Williams that he did hit. Both designed. If the routes deep aren't open to get the first down, take the check down, let them run, and then we're going to go for it on fourth down. So it's 4th and 15, you got 8 yards. That to me is a successful third down play, even though it's not a third down conversion.
Agreed.
So I would add that to the mix too, which set you up for your fourth down conversion.
For the 1 and 1 or 1 of 1 for the fourth down. So, they were incredibly efficient on third down in this game. They absolutely were. And I think this is a plus based on, and it's slightly grading on the curve for me because they've been so bad at it before. and they were good at it today. That's why I want to go plus.
Honestly, I'm not even grading on a curve. I'm just going plus because I think the performance was that good. And honestly, you needed it, Vince, because you faced 2 third downs on your first drive of the game. You faced a 3rd and 6 and a 3rd and 2. And then, so we normally do like that key moments breakdown. We're not doing that today. So I want to mention it here now. When you talk about that first 3rd down of the game, it's 3rd and 6. And Notre Dame lines up in 11 personnel. They motion Eli Raridan in, and they basically, Navy's lined up. 8 guys are coming, or at least looking like they're coming, and they're clearly playing man there. And at the snap, Navy dropped 3 guys underneath. That was such a great play call and execution because you had 2 guys open. He either could have hit Jaden Greathouse, which was the correct read. It was an inside-out read. It's basically a seam post or a deep end by Chris Mitchell. He could have gone to the deep end if Jaden Greathouse ran a poor route on his route, which he did not. He ran a great route. But if he did, let's just say, guy covered him, whatever, you had that deep end coming right behind him to Chris Mitchell that also would have moved the chains. And he had time to hit both of those routes. He made the proper read, threw a good ball. Would have just liked to see it about 6 inches further in front of Jaden so he could just lead him a little bit more. But it was still a good ball. Put it right on him, get that first down. Because your objective there is move the sticks, not necessarily lead him for a touchdown. And you put it on him so he catches it and you move the chains. They were expecting what, Vince? Either some kind of run or they were expecting most likely quick game because Notre Dame's doing quick game. They're going to do some sort of option route, some sort of motion pivot, some sort of tight end out of the backfield, something over the middle. They do that. Notre Dame was able to hit, remember the week before against Georgia Tech, that little wide middle route to Jaden Greathouse. They've moved the chains on 3rd down multiple times with that. They also moved to 3rd down against Stanford on that particular route out of 3x1. And some out of 2x1. And so they were expecting something quick. So they showed a heavy pressure, dropped a lineman and a backer, and they were taking away quick game. Well, Notre Dame, I don't know if it was a tendency breaker. They saw something from Navy, but they called a deep shot, which meant there was no help down the field on the post or the deep end. None. So it was a great play call. They went complete max pro on that one. So there was Eli Raridan stayed in and blocked, and the running back stayed in and blocked, and they picked it up. Riley had tons of time and made that play. That was huge, Vince. And then they also had a 3rd and 2 that they ran near the inside the 5-yard line because they could have got a first down instead of scoring, and they got that with a duo call where Jeremiah Love just put his head down and just bowled through, and they got a good push off the line. Those 2 third downs, Vince, to me, were huge because you needed that first drive touchdown. Absolutely needed that first drive touchdown. Now, you didn't get to a 3rd down, I don't believe. Actually, you did. Let's see here. You threw, and then your second drive, you're 3rd and 1. Riley Leonard sneaks it in for a touchdown, gets overturned because of a penalty. 3rd and goal from the 6-yard line. Again, another key 3rd down play. Riley finds Chris Mitchell wide open in the end zone for a touchdown. So your first 3 third downs of the game, you converted to set up 2 scores. That was a big, big part of the game, Vince. And it's hard for me to nitpick. Yeah, you'd like to see a play here, a play there. I mean, pluses don't only happen if you're perfect. Overall, the start on 3rd down was so vitally important, Vince, that it's hard for me not to give them a plus on that particular drive. And then on the drive where they really put the game away after the miss on 3rd down, You had the successful play on 3rd down there that set up the 4th down conversion, which I thought was a big moment in that game. So I'm giving them a plus. I thought 3rd down efficiency was very good in this game.
All right. 2 plus. We're on a roll here. All right. So
I mean, you scored 51 points and you're on pace for 600 yards against a top 25 team. You're going to get a lot of good grades.
Yes,
you're going to get a lot of good grades.
That is 100% accurate. So we have 2 pluses and a check going into the 4th key to victory. And I have a feeling this is going to go in a positive way as well. It's big plays through the air. So, Brian, what say you on Notre Dame's effectiveness throwing the ball?
I mean, it's hard for me. It's another plus, Vince.
Yeah,
I mean,
I agree.
Because big plays in the passing game aren't just go routes, which they hit for a touchdown in this game. I mean, you had a 42-yard gain on an inside post route. You had a 37-yard touchdown pass on an outside go ball. You had 2 20-yard gains on throws that went over 20 yards One was on an over, actually 3. One got called back because of a penalty, but you had the deep over route to Jaden Greathouse, the one that you and I talked about that was literally they went like 2-man route, just a post and an over. That was it. And Riley Leonard fit that sucker between over a linebacker and in between 2 DBs and for a big play. He had the deep outcut to it might even been a post corner, but I think it was a deep outcut. I don't know what you thought about that route by Jordan Faison for another 20-plus yard gain. And then he hit Faison again over the middle for a 20-something yard gain. So he had 5, I believe, big throws that traveled beyond 20 yards, if I'm remembering that correctly off the top of my head, Vince. So, and that was all in the first half, because by the time you got to the third quarter, I mean, the game was basically over, and I don't think they took any deep shots on that drive. They just ran the clock out. And, you know what? Included a 3rd and 8, 24-yard scramble by Riley Leonard, another successful third down play. But yeah, Vince, I mean, I think they made a lot of big plays in the passing game, and it was geared towards, okay, this is what Navy wants to do. Right. So we're going to take advantage of it. Navy was basically saying, you're going to have to, like, this was Navy's game plan. Their entire game plan was, if you're going to beat us, you're going to have to beat us throwing the ball, and you're going to have to beat us throwing the ball down the field. And Notre Dame, for the first time all season, really said, oh, okay, we'll take that bet. And it was because of the quarterback. It was because of the pass pro from the line. It was because of the pass pro from the running backs. They were outstanding in this game. There was one particular play, Vince, where the line completely screwed up the protection. So they ran a twist and then brought a player off the edge. Jeremiah Love was going back to get the edge blitzer. That was his man. And I have to go back and watch the play. I don't know if it was Knapp or if it was Trouth. I'd have to go back and watch it. But they got confused with the twist, and Knapp. One of them turned out to the back.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Or to the blitzer. Yeah. And so the D tackle runs free. So Jeremiah Love is running towards the blitzer, sees the mistake, turns inside and drills the defensive tackle, which allows Riley Leonard to slide. And I think he got a throw off, I think, on that particular play, Vince. And Jadarian Price had another one. They brought a linebacker blitz right up the A-gap, and Jadarian stepped up and smacked him and just stoned him and allowed Riley to slide step and get the ball off down the field. Actually, it might have been on the Bo Collins touchdown, actually.
In the third quarter.
No, that was in the was that the third quarter? Okay.
That was his last throw of the game.
Okay, there you go.
Was that bomb to Bo Collins, which I think, we're talking about big pass plays here, right? So right. The fact that they weren't afraid to just go deep, at that point in the game, I mean, it was a great route by Bo Collins. I mean, he did everything he was supposed to do on that one, and Riley had plenty of time in the pocket and was able to step up and just make that throw. And
it was not on that throw that Jeremiah did that. But he had a very clean pocket on that one, though. I mean, I'm looking at it now. He had a great double team by Knapp. Knapp and Shrouth did a great job. They're like both protecting B gap. Knapp stepping to B gap. Shrouth is punching out on B gap. He took that. You have a nice job by Mitchell Evans with a pass pro, another max pro. Emil handles his job. Coogan and Rocco handle a twist, and then Riley finds the open guy for a touchdown. So, I mean, you took your shots. You got the ball down the field. You made big plays. I mean, we talk a lot about, Notre Dame being a really quick game thing. If you go look at Riley's numbers, this is Pro Football Focus numbers. I haven't done my numbers. But if you look at Riley Leonard's production on throws of 10 yard, more than 10 yards, he went 6 of 10 for 79, 134 yards. Let me see here. Deep, middle. So that'd be 140 yards. So he went 3 of 4 on shots down the field. So that'd have been 6 of 10. So he went 3 of 4 on shots 20 yards or more for 105 yards and a touchdown. He went 3 of 6 on throws between 10 and 19, although I think one of those might have been actually a little deeper than that, for 35 yards and a touchdown. And, and he had a drop, by the way, because that throw from Jordan Faison should have been caught. That was over the middle. That should have been caught as well. So, yeah, you threw the ball down the field. You made big plays in the pass game. I mean, and like you said, that was the last throw of the game. That was their first possession of the third quarter.
Yeah. Yep. It was huge.
Good performance.
It was massive because I needed him to go 175 and he went 178. So thanks, Riley.
You gamblers. Tell you what.
I appreciate you. Just keeps things interesting, Brian. That's all.
I bet. I guess.
Keeps it interesting.
So I give it a plus, Vince.
Yeah.
And you should have done that against Navy. Yeah. Right? Absolutely. But there's a lot of times they should have done things they didn't do this year in the throwing game.
Correct. Correct.
I was very happy with the performance.
Yes, and now they get a bye week to work on some different things because we saw some different things in the passing game in yesterday's game than we have seen so far this year. I mean, we were praising Mike Denbrock for the quick game, what they were able to do, and then they kind of did some different things. They kind of went a little bit more max protect at times, and they allowed the wide receivers to run very efficient routes, by the way. This is the best route running I've seen from the wide receivers when I got to watch the All-22, and you can finally see the routes that they're running and the way that they're running them. And I mean, you and I were talking about a play early on in the game where it was a two-man route. It was a two-man route, and Navy dropped 6 into coverage, and they still completed for a long pass play. Like
26-yard gain, I believe.
Correct. I mean, not only was it a really good throw by Riley, there's no doubt about it, but it was a really, really good route, and it was really good protection. I mean, they had 8 guys protecting, but I mean,
and the route by Greathouse was phenomenal. I mean,
it was fantastic.
Excellent.
It was fantastic. The way he came off of his stem. I mean, it was a great route. But my point being is the wide receivers ran crisp routes. They did a little bit more max protect. They pushed the ball down the field a little bit more. So now we're kind of seeing what's in the arsenal here for the Notre Dame offense based on who they're going to be playing, I think, too.
Oh.
So,
I mean, a week ago this time, we're talking about how they were just completely unwilling to make any calls that would ask him to throw the ball down the field much.
Right. Or be protected for longer than 2 seconds.
Well, that's why, because I don't think they trusted the protection. There was a very clear trust in the protection in this game.
Yes.
By Mike Denbrock. And I think he played into the fact that Navy was having a very run-heavy game plan, stop the run-heavy game plan. And Mike Denbrock said, okay, we have to have answers for that.
Right.
And they had some answers in the run game, which we'll dive into, but then also the pass game, which was huge.
Agreed. That's going to do it for our offensive keys to the game revisited. Make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell. Share with your family and friends, and, of course, jump on the boards.irishbreakdown.com for breaking news, for analysis, for video analysis that's going to be up there here in the next day or two, so you might want to check that out. So it's money well spent, folks. I promise you that. So boards.irishbreakdown.com, and it's not too early to start thinking about those Christmas gifts, all right? You could always gift a membership, and you can gift it early, too. That's okay. So boards.irishbreakdown.com. Third segment of the night, Brian. Let's talk defense. And we are going to go over your defensive keys to victory.
You're part of the Irish Breakdown team. Would my keys be any different than yours?
Not so far. No.
Okay,
not at all,
so there you go. You say hour.
All right, I'll take it. All right, so let's go over our keys to victory revisited here for the defense. And I'm interested to see where you go with a few of these, but let's jump right off with your first one. It was just very simple. Be disciplined. And I have a feeling that has to do, obviously with eye discipline and knowing your role, knowing your job, doing what you're supposed to do. Exactly. Where you can really mess up against the triple option. And we talked about this a million times. It's when you try to do someone else's job and then you end up not doing your job. And then that's when you get creased. And that's when big plays happen. And you've got to be disciplined. You've got to block out the noise of what other guys are doing around you and just focus on what you're doing, because that's what a triple option offense wants you to do. They want you to fall asleep. They want you to get bored of what you're doing, play in and play out. And they want you to try to make up for your buddy. And being disciplined is a very, very key part of being a good defense against triple option. So in your opinion, sir, did they pass that test?
Well, Vince, I'm gonna be honest with you. Going into grading the defense, and just kind of my gut feel watching it live, I was probably thinking like leaning towards a minus. But when you break the game down, I'm actually giving them a check on this one. Like they did what they needed to do.
That's where I'm at.
Navy had some big plays, and I know that's also part of it. And on all of those big plays, there was somebody who didn't do their job. There was somebody that didn't either attack their assignment correctly, someone who didn't, take a proper angle. Like I'm watching this play against Navy, the 47-yard touchdown run, and Jaden Alsbury is doing a great job of, he's got to play the pitch man, right? And Jack Kaiser's got to play the quarterback. He's got to play over top of the quarterback. He sees the puller. He takes on the puller, but he takes him on really square. And he's got to play over the top, because if he plays over the top on that puller, he funnels the quarterback right into Josh Burnham. And then also Jalen Sneed takes a really poor angle on the play as well and knocks into Xavier Watts. So there was, and I thought Xavier didn't do a very good job. He went underneath a guy instead of going over top of a guy. There just was a lot wrong with that particular play. And so, they didn't do their jobs on that play. And then on the 60-yarder, it was a very similar situation where you had Kingston Viliama Asa, who otherwise I thought played a pretty darn good football game. Just over pursuit. He saw run away, and every time in his life that he's ever seen run away, it's okay. I got to flow to the ball, and against this option, no. When you're seeing that, you got to still protect that backside A gap. You got to do that, and so those type of things, Vince. You look into it and you say, hey, listen, that's kind of part of what you do, and that was a big moment in that game. So I thought that. I'm actually watching that particular play now. So like they ran just a jet sweep, and Kingston sees it and he goes flying. Well, a power read is you've got to play the power. So the front side linebacker's playing the jet sweep. You've got to play the power. You've got to be the cutback guy. And he goes flying out because he thinks the running back's got the ball. Freshman mistake. And then you've got, Jalen Sneed turning the guy loose, Adon Schuler turning the guy loose. You had about 4 or 5 plays in the game where somebody messed up on their assignment. But out of 60-some plays, I think Georgia Tech or Navy ran, 60 plays? 57 snaps. 5 out of 57 snaps is too many that I would like, but the reason Navy did very little outside of those 5 plays is because of outside of that, they
played on those other ones. Yeah,
I mean, correct. Right. So like you gave up a 60-yard run on the one play, and Navy got no points out of that. Why? Because they buckled down and did their jobs after that. So you had 100. So Blake Horvath finishes that game with 129 yards of offense, rushing. 107 of those came on 2 carries. You had a 32-yard gain in there, and you had I believe a 21-yard gain by Navy. So that's 160 yards on 4 plays. They finished with 150 yards. So that means on the other 53 plays, you only gave up 150 yards, which is 2.8 yards per play, which is why they only have 14 points.
Right.
So my initial feel of the defense watching the game was they weren't that great. And they still made too many mistakes. But they flew around, they were physical, and outside of a few plays, they dominated. Now, those few plays count, which is why this isn't a plus, right? But if you just cleaned up 2 of those, the numbers they would have had in this game defensively would have been exceptional. So I'm giving them a check. I feel better about the performance of the defense after breaking down the film than I did with my live gut feeling. There's still too many mistakes, but even the mistakes, didn't get to this quite quickly enough, but they were like 6-yard gains, 7-yard gains. They were not getting gashed like Navy has done to them in the past. I mean, almost every year when Notre Dame struggles with the option, there's at least 2 fullback dives that break.
Yeah.
None of that in this game. They ate the fullback up in this game. I think the biggest run that Teska had in the game was a jet sweep. I think, you know what I mean? Overall, Vince, I think they did their job outside of a few plays. And so I give them a check for discipline. I think for the most part, they did this well.
Right. It's not a plus because you can't give up over 100 yards on 2 plays to the quarterback. But it's a check. I completely agree with you. I think overall, I said to you as we were watching, as I was watching the defense back and, watching the all-22 and everything, I was like, well, my biggest takeaway from this is how friggin' athletic and fast the skill players are.
Yes.
Like that's my biggest takeaway.
He did text me that.
It's like,
they're really fast.
They're so fast. And we're going to get to one of the reasons that allows them to be fast in a second. But it's just this defense just moves so quickly. And even when there is a slight mistake in protecting or in defending the option, sometimes speed can overcome that. Sometimes speed and athleticism overcomes that, and your slight mistake ends up being a 2 to 3 yard gain as opposed to, something in the backfield or something along those lines. So that was definitely part of the be disciplined part, is just they were just really freaking athletic and getting to the football very, very quickly and very, very fast. So that's definitely part of it. So I agree with you. I can't give it I am a stickler when it comes to the option, and either you defend it or you don't, and they didn't a few times, and so I can't give them the plus.
If they would have tackled Horvath on the first long touchdown run and then held them to a field goal, I'd have given them a plus, because none of the big plays would have led to scores or led to touchdowns. So, because I think their first half, the play of the first half, the big mistake that they made on that, you had the blown coverage on the muff, that kind of happens. And then you had the 15-yard penalty from Riley Mills where he got hands in the face because the guard's short and he just shouldn't have done that. It was a mistake. But none of those other plays, if you made that one stop on the long run and tackled him at the 15 and did what you did on the other play, which is held them to a field goal or attempt, then I might have given them a plus, because they're going to get big play. They're going to get at least a couple.
How the option works, man.
It was a couple too many, and the one led to touchdowns for me to give them a plus. But overall, like I said, this is why we do this show, man. It's not to remind everyone how great our calls were after the game. It's like, look, we looked at the film and some things we got right, and some things I feel better or I feel worse about this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I felt a lot better about the play of the defense after I broke down the film.
Yep. Yeah.
Outside of 6 or 7 plays.
I would take that defense into battle against any triple option team. Because look, Navy's triple option, and yes, they're in shotgun and blah, blah, blah. I get it. But they run it with about as good a proficiency as you're going to find this particular team, right? I mean, I realize Navy as a whole is what they do, but we've seen Navy teams when they're really, really good at triple. This team's really, really good at it. And Notre Dame shut it down for the most part. Yeah. And I think that needs to be said as well.
And we've heard a lot about how this is a much better passing Navy team. And we've talked a lot about this is a much better passing Navy team. And it is. Notre Dame made them look like a triple option team throwing the football.
Correct.
2 busted plays on coverage, and outside of that, they couldn't complete passes with any consistency whatsoever.
Yep. Absolutely. Agree. I mean, they had 88 yards of passing. 88. I mean, that's
and 53 of them were on blown coverages.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, okay. Number 2, dominate the trenches. And this is where I was going, and I didn't want to trample on key number 2 too much when I was talking about how fast and athletic the secondary and the linebackers are. Part of the reason for that is the guys up front were not allowing Navy to get to the second level and allowed those guys to just roam free. I mean, I thought the front did an admirable job against this Navy offense and what they were asked to do, and what they, especially the guys on the edge, that's not an easy thing to do a lot of times against a triple option team. I thought the front held up very, very well. And I thought they one of the main things is they didn't allow Navy to get to that second level and allowed those guys in the back to just wreak havoc on this offense.
No, you had the linebacker mistake on the 60-yard run off the jet sweep action. It was not a traditional triple play. And then the other one was an outside run where they got the big yards. Navy did very little inside between the tackles. And that's a big part. That's the defensive line. I thought all 4 tackles that played. I thought Heinisch played a good game. I thought Rubio played a good game. He had a great red zone tackle. They ended up scoring on the next play, but I think it was second down. He reaches out, he dives for the guy and trips him up, and it wasn't necessarily his gap. He just saw the ball and went and made a play. And I thought Cross and Mills were very good. You had the bad mistake by Riley on the penalty, and then he did miss a tackle on the backfield, but he's very forceful at the point of attack. Howard, who I thought was very good, held the point very well. They were very disruptive, and and to the point you made, Vince, they kept the Navy offensive line at the line of scrimmage.
Mm-hmm.
That was the thing. They didn't get moved off the ball, and they kept Navy's offensive line at the line of scrimmage, which allowed their linebackers to fly downhill and make a lot of plays.
Yeah.
So, I mean, normally when an option team is rolling, your safeties are going to have a lot of tackles. And when you look at Notre Dame's defense, here was their top 10 tacklers in the game. Linebacker, safety, end, safety, linebacker, D-tackle, linebacker, safety.
And that's safety, second team safety, by the way.
And also had a tackle on special teams.
Yeah.
So, your front did a lot of good things in this game. So I give them a plus.
Well,
I won't give them a plus. I give them a check. It leans more to plus because I still wanted to see a couple more plays on the ball. That's my only thing. There wasn't a lot of – they only had 2 tackles for loss the entire game. D-line had none of them. You know what I mean? That's the only thing that keeps them from a plus. It wasn't like a brilliant. It was they just did their job and they did it well. So I give them a check. Maybe go check plus, which we said there's variations to it, but they played well. They did their job and they did their role.
Well, and the other piece of this for me is the fact that the fullback didn't get going in this game.
Neither of them.
Yeah, anytime.
Their number 2 fullback rushed for over 100 yards against Notre Dame 2 years ago.
Correct.
He's their backup.
Yes.
And they completely shut those 2 guys down, and they're good football players.
Yep. And that's why I'm going plus on this one. Personally, they shut down your number one goal is the defense, whether it's tactical or otherwise. Your number one goal is shut down the fullback. They 100% did that. They allowed the guys behind them to move around. Yeah, in triple. Yep, absolutely. So it's a plus for me. I understand where you're coming from. It's a plus.
I'm not going to push back on you. I mean, it's like they did what they needed to do and did it well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Key number 3. And I think I know where you're going to head with this one, but it is tackle well.
I'll give them a check again. They had too many misses for me to give them a plus.
I agree.
Riley had the miss in the backfield. You had Drake had a miss on what could have been a tackle for loss. He missed. It turns into a 7-yard gain. Adon had a miss. Christian Gray had a miss. That just off the top of my head, there was enough missed tackles for me to say you could have played better. But they did their job, and the missed tackles didn't turn into big plays. They were, because I think this is thing to me. There's 2 aspects of tackling well. Step 1 is the first guy that arrives at the ball. Don't miss tackles. Step 2 is, are you flying to the ball as a defense? To where if a guy, so here's a perfect example. Jalen Sneed has a chance to get a guy in the backfield, doesn't get it, but he forces the guy to go around him.
Yep.
And I can't, who was it that made the play? Was it Christian Gray? Or was it a safety? Was it a Don? But somebody comes and cleans it up and makes the play.
Because he forced him to go horizontal.
Yeah.
When he was trying to go vertical, forced him to go horizontal. Yeah, right.
Yes, it'd have been nice if Jalen would have made that play, but he was disruptive. And then the second guy in was there, not Jalen misses the tackle, and then the guy's outside and there's nobody there. You guys are getting blocked. And the Riley misses on the play in the backfield. The guy got tackled for I think a 2-yard gain. So it's like, you watch them play, Vince, and it's like, I would have liked them to tackle a little bit better and the first man in, but they were just flying to the ball. And there was you look at the statistics, they had 23 solo tackles and 46 assisted tackles because they're just guys were flying to the ball. There was just nowhere for Navy to go. And that factored in my opinion, to the turnovers.
Absolutely.
Yes, they weren't quote unquote forced, but they had to, because of how fast Notre Dame was, and the fact that Al Golden wasn't doing the run stunts and he wasn't crashing and he wasn't overplaying things. He knows he has athletes and he schemes to their athleticism. So you're letting the defensive ends do more 2-man playing than we've seen them ever do, in my opinion, successfully. We've seen them try it, but they haven't had the ends to do it. In this game, they did. So I think Navy was a little bit shook by how there's plays they're running and you're thinking, uh-oh, and then somebody comes flying downhill, and it's like a 3-yard gain. And I think they got a little bit shook.
Yeah.
And, that's where I think it's at. It's like that got in their heads a little bit because looked at the one that they were rushing stuff, like the pitch he had. He was rushing it because I think he was worried, like, if I play this out too much, this Burnham kid, who I just saw on film 2 weeks ago, break up one of these plays and return it. You know what I mean? And they got a touchdown off of it. I think it got in their heads. It got in their heads that they were rushing stuff because they were concerned about the speed of the Notre Dame defense. So,
agreed.
I give him a check.
Yeah, it's a check.
And I would lean more towards plus than I would minus, so
Sure.
maybe a check plus. I just thought the pursuit to the football was outstanding. And then, again, that Leonard Moore play was huge. That was a huge tackle in this game, chasing that guy from behind. I love what D. Troll Hunter said. He says, had the angle. Because actually, Leonard Moore didn't actually have the angle initially. He's just so freaking fast that he caught the guy from behind. And he's a spot on. He did not have the angle.
No,
it reminded me that. Do you remember that spring a few years ago when Dexter Williams? It was in the stadium, and Dexter Williams takes off running.
What you're gonna say,
and you're like, he's about to house it, and then Troy Pride, who did not have the angle
from the other side of the field. Yes,
and he ran a 4.4 flat.
Right.
And it reminded me so much of that play, and he just got to him so quickly. And Notre Dame didn't give up points. 2 times this year, Leonard Moore has chased a guy from behind on a long play. First time he forces a fumble, Notre Dame recovers. Second time he tackles the guy, and then the defense holds firm, and they force a missed field goal. Like, that's huge. That's hustle. He could have been like, oh, crap, that's a big play. I'm jog over. No, he went and hustled. So that's part of this too, Vince.
Yeah.
Is that right there? And they did what they needed to do.
I like how you added in the gang tackling and the flying of the football, because
that's part of tackling.
It's absolutely part of it, and that's a signature of Al Golden's defenses right now is the fact that they are just flying to the football. There's no.
If I miss a tackle, Vince, and the guy goes for 60, that should be viewed very differently as a defense than if I miss a tackle and the guy goes for 2 yards because the guy after me is there to make the play.
Correct. Yeah,
that's team tackling. So, yes, you're still getting the minus for the missed tackle, but as a defense, that's impressive.
Right.
And that's what this defense has.
And I'm in the check window as well, just because there were some misses early that were not good. So I don't want to go plus, but it's a check plus for me. Like if we're going down that road, it's a check plus. I think that's kind of where they are for me. There's a lot of good tackling, and there was just a few misses that prevent me from going to the plus category. So that's where I'm at with this. Final key to victory revisited. Limit big plays. And this is huge against Navy specifically. And I'm going to pull a piece of what you said in here. Navy ranks 6th in college football in plays of 40 yards or more at 13, which included 6 plays of 40 yards or 6 pass plays of 40 yards or more. They know how to big play people. And they had been doing it, and they gave up 0 in the pass game, and they gave up 2 in the run game. And again, they were both to the quarterback, but they only gave up 2 in this game, and it didn't end up hurting them in the long run. 1 led to points, 1 didn't.
I give him a check. Again, it can't be a minus because you gave up the touchdown on the 1.
Gave up, absolutely.
And then the miss on the muff blown coverage, it went for 21 yards. That's a big play. That also ended with a touchdown. And so, you can't give those up, but to get a plus, but to get a check to say, hey, you did your job. I mean, yeah, absolutely. And again, the tackle by Leonard Moore on the 160-yard gain ended up being huge because they ended up not scoring. So, and this is something I said in the show that Trevor and I did on Thursday. Look, they're going to get a couple big plays, but you got to make sure they don't go for points. The first one did. The second one didn't. And the whole point is if you with your defense, if you make them run more plays, they get a big play, fine, tackle the guy. And then make them run more plays to get in the end zone. And that's exactly what they did on that second long run. And Navy got 0 points out of that drive because they missed a field goal. And that's why you do what you do. So, I mean, Vince, just the numbers speak for themselves. They had 4 plays of over 20 yards. I would have liked to have not have been 4, especially when 2 of them were on blown coverages. But, it's going to happen. Especially when you consider how young this defense is. That's the other thing, the other part of events you have to think about. In this game, Notre Dame on the defensive line started 2 redshirt sophomores and played another redshirt sophomore and Donovan Heinisch a bunch. They started a true sophomore and a redshirt freshman at linebacker. They started a true sophomore, a true freshman, and a redshirt freshman in the secondary, and brought a true freshman off the bench at linebacker. Like, because Jordan Clark, I mean, think about it. Their starting lineup, you got rid of a 6th-year senior in RJ Oben and added a redshirt sophomore and Junior Tulamaka. You got rid of a 6th-year senior in Jordan Clark. Not that he did anything wrong, but it's just the way that
the way they went about it. Yeah.
And you added a redshirt freshman in this. Right. So you got younger in this matchup against Navy than you already were. And when you consider that, and that's the context of it, and you consider that, you think, boy, it's a surprise they didn't make more big plays. But that's how good this defense. That's why I said, Vince, when I really studied the game and really thought about it, I was like, you know what? I came away with a much more positive view of the play of the defense than I did watching it live. And again, there's still a lot to to critique from a coaching standpoint. Principles that you could carry over into, because there's other teams that are going to run power read against you besides just Navy. That's not a option-only play, and you've got to defend that correctly. So you'll learn those things. But overall, Vince, I mean, they did what they needed to do. And when you consider how young they are, it was incredibly impressive with the performance that they had. This is a very talented young group of defensive players. Very talented.
That's going to do it for our defensive keys to victory revisited. We've got one more segment coming your way, so make sure you stick around. But in the meantime, make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell. Share with your family and friends. Throw us a 5-star review over on the podcast side of things. That'd be awesome as well. And then, of course, jump on the boards@irishbreakdown.com. All kinds of good stuff waiting for you and will be uploaded in the next 24 to 48 hours. So make sure you join the discussion over at boards@irishbreakdown.com. Final segment of the night, Brian, and this is a new segment for us. And we decided, since we kind of covered everything pretty well in the post-game show, we wanted to do something a little bit different tonight. And one of the things that the rewatching of the film allows us to really kind of hone in on is the line play. And specifically when we're watching offense, it's the offensive line play. And we're able to kind of pay a little bit more attention to what each guy is doing, how they're doing, their footwork, and all those things that are really difficult to see live when you're at a game, obviously. And then also even when you're watching the TV copy live.
And really study what we know they're playing line games, but what exactly were the line games they were playing? It's
all of it. Yeah. All that stuff that's happening in the trenches is really hard to watch, and watch a game for what it is, right? And where the football's going and things of that nature. And so that's one of the things that we do. And so we decided that instead of kind of rehashing some of the things that we talked about on the post-game show, let's talk about the offensive line and really break down how the offensive line did. And this is a bit of a new look offensive line this game, with Billy Schrouth moving back into the starting lineup, but in a new position over at left guard. And what did that look like? And, how did the play calling of Mike Denbrock affect things for the offensive line? I think they definitely did. And, our thoughts. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk O-line here in the final segment of the show. So, Brian, I will kick it over to you, and we'll just get this party started and talking about the offensive line.
Well, it's first of all, Vince, I want to talk. Here's how I want to do it, if that's okay with you. And I want to get your thoughts on all these things as well. I want to kind of start off, just give my overall feel of the play of the line and the new look offensive line. Then I want to talk about what we saw in the run game, how they performed in the run game, and then we'll wrap up with pass pro, because that's going to be a relatively quick section. But let me just say this first of all, Vince, and I might have said it yesterday in the show, but I definitely felt this way when I broke it down. This is the first time all season where I really watched the offensive line and felt like A&M, since the A&M game, I should say since the Purdue game, when Craig goes down and Schrouth goes down, right? Because I still feel like if those two don't get hurt, we're having a much different conversation about the offensive line. But since Billy Schrouth got hurt and Ashton Craig got hurt, this is the first time I've really felt like this offensive line can actually be pretty good. Like not a dominant 2020 O-line. We're not even, I mean, it's silly to compare them to 15 and 17, but it's not even like a 2020 offensive line. It reminds me more of like the 18 offensive line of what it could be, where you're young, but you're talented, and you're going to make some youthful mistakes, but you're so talented at running back and other positions, you're just like, dude, just do your job. Remember that offensive line, Vince? You had Robert Haynes, he was a true sophomore. You had Tommy Kramer and Aaron Banks were redshirt sophomores. I mean, excuse me, Liam Eichenberg were redshirt sophomores. And then, and I think it was Alex Bars got hurt early. He goes down, and eventually you're throwing in Aaron Banks into the starting lineup, who's a redshirt freshman. And it wasn't a dominant performance, but that team went undefeated because Harry Hiestand, had coached those guys up so well that they were able to kind of, that first year, they were better in the first year after Hiestand left, because 18 was the first year without Coach Hiestand. And they got regressively worse in 2019 despite having more experience because they got further away from Coach Hiestand. And then, of course, Coach works with the 2020 offensive line because he was out of the NFL by then, and he was living in town and working with those guys and Chris Watt, that they were good in 2020 again as well. But like, they had enough of that tutelage under him the year before that they were able to kind of go out there and just did their job. And they were young, they made youthful mistakes, but man, that when they were playing well, that offensive line was really good. This is the first time I've really felt like, okay, I'm seeing that a little bit from this line. And they weren't dominant on Saturday. They played well. They played good football on Saturday. They weren't dominant. But it was the first time I was like, they look like a unit for the first time all year. Now, again, things to clean up. A couple times Emil Wagner got to the second level and didn't really bring force. It's like, because I don't know if he was quite sure of what he was doing. Billy was rusty. There was a couple times, still too many times Pat Coogan doesn't move his feet. But I thought Pat overall just battled his butt off. I thought Rocco was super steady in this game, Vince, is, just individually. And I would say this was probably Anthony Knapp's best game at Notre Dame. And there was a couple mistakes. I mean, you're going to make mistakes, like not knowing how to handle the one twist, and then they let a guy go and things like that. But like, a perfect example of what I mean by them playing as a unit is the 64-yard touchdown run by Jeremiah Love, because two guys blocked three dudes on that play. So they had two guys. They had a line game, and then they brought I think it was a safety fire. And they're doing a double team, and a linebacker comes and a safety comes, and they have that double team. And I think it was I'd have to go back. I don't know if it was inside zone or duo. I have to go back and look at the run, but it was one of the two. And Rocco leaves the double team to go pick up the blitzer. Pat Coogan leaves the guy to go pick up the crashing linebacker. And you're just like, there's three guys, you got to block two of them. But before he leaves, Pat shoves the D tackle, takes on the linebacker, and because he shoved the tackle, that guy could not get back in on Jeremiah Love. And you're like, two guys blocked three guys on that play, and then that's all Jeremiah needed was that one crease, and he's gone. And there were so many times where I'm watching Billy Schrouth and Pat Coogan, or it's Billy Schrouth and Anthony Knapp, the play I talked about earlier, where Anthony's stepping down to protect B-gap, but it's his primary responsibility, where with Billy, it was a secondary responsibility. So he's eyeing A-gap, his primary responsibility, but he's got a firm hand in the B-gap, and he got enough of that guy to allow Anthony to get over on that guy and make the block. It was great teamwork. And you just saw more of that in this game, Vince, and you've probably seen at any point in time this season in all phases of the game. They did a pretty good job against A&M in the run game, but this is the first time we've seen them do it in all phases. So just as a unit, you watch it, and then you just see the experience and talent difference with Billy Schrouth in the game compared to when he's not in the game. Yeah. That to me was why for the first time I'm like, okay. And I was, sometimes Joe Rudolph gets there the wrong way, but he got there. Just like last year when he was way too late putting Billy Schrouth in the starting lineup last year. And then this year, the biggest mistake he made was not putting Billy Schrouth next to Anthony Knapp to start the season.
Putting both those young guys next to each other.
Yeah. People say, well, he wanted to go with the younger guy. So here's something I learned right after the starters were announced. I talked to a source who's very close to the situation, and he said part of the problem with how he handled the line in fall camp is Sam Pendleton, when Sam moved to guard, he played left guard only. And every single day, he was rotating Coogan and Rocco between both guard spots, and center for Coogan. So you wonder why Pat Coogan, or by Sam Pendleton, who's going to be a good football player at Notre Dame, he's a little in over his head. He's had a lot thrown at him. He's just swimming a little bit, but he's going to be a good player at Notre Dame. But he's just playing left guard every day. And one day Pat Coogan's playing center. One day Pat Coogan's playing left guard. The next day Pat Coogan's playing right guard. One day Rocco's playing left guard. The next day Rocco's playing right guard. And these guys are literally rotating every single day. And then you wonder why they didn't grade out with the consistency that the guy that was only playing left guard every single day did. And I think that was a mistake in preparation. And that resulted in the offensive line that you had. When in reality, if you wanted to start Sam Pendleton, you never should have moved him to left guard to begin with. You should have had him at right guard when you knew Jagasol was out. First week of camp, Jagasol goes down, and you're gonna give Anthony Knapp his shot. And from what I'm told by sources, Anthony, within a few days, it was pretty obvious. We didn't know it at the time, but this is what I've learned since. It was pretty obvious that Anthony was going to win that job. Like, he just was the most steady because Tosh is dealing with injuries, and Charles was out. The minute you realize Anthony was that guy, a week into fall camp, you should have moved Billy Schrouth back over to left guard where he's played before, and you should have let Rocco and Pendleton battle at right guard, because Pendleton had just moved from center. He could have easily moved over to right guard, and they didn't do that. So, but hey, here we are going into November. Notre Dame doesn't play a game until November, and you're where you should have been anyway. With the exception of Ashton Craig and Jagasol, 3 of your starting offensive line positions are now what they should have been day one, which is Rocco at right guard, Billy at left guard, and Amir at right tackle. Gets us a lot closer to the line that we should have seen at the beginning. And then at center, you've got a kid who is not the most talented guy in the world, but at center, he battled his butt off and paddles his butt off and handles his job in Pat Coogan. He's okay there. And Anthony Knapp is coming along, and now you got a veteran next to him, Vince.
He'll come
now
along.
You feel like you're going to get whatever the best of Billy Schrouth as a true freshman is. I have much more confidence we're going to get that now. He's played better in recent games, but he still has a lot of issues. But part of it, and I think this is what we saw on Saturday, was he was the most nuanced of the knowing the offense of the 2 linemen that were starting on the left side compared to him and Sam. Well, now he's not anymore. He's got a veteran 6-game starter next to him who's a junior in college. And you're seeing, and I think you saw Anthony flourish, because this was one of the more complex line games that they've seen in a while, and they handled it very well. Very well. And so that was my biggest takeaway is it's like Joe Rudolph gets to the end line, but he takes like these really twisted, paths to get there. And that's what we saw this year. And it sucks, but as far as it took this long, but hey, we're here, and they're entering the stretch run. You got this game under your belt. Now you go into the bye week, and this group gets an extra week of work together. But it was not a great first performance. It was not, boy, they dominated. It was not that. But this is the most unified this line has looked all season in both phases of the game, Vince. And I think the reinsertion of Billy Schrouth at left guard instead of putting him back at right and then leaving Sam there to struggle. Now Sam gets to take a step back, clear his head a little bit, learn from a veteran player in front of him, and get himself back to where he kind of was earlier in the season, where he wasn't thinking as much and he just was going and blowing people up. Because remember, first couple of games, like against Texas A&M, I mean, he struggled, but Sam had 3 blocks that were just monster blocks. I haven't seen that from him in a month. Yep. Because again, mentally, he's just swimming right now. Because and a lot of young guys get that. It's a sophomore slump, Vince. You just get to that point where you've hit that wall mentally, and just everything's going way too fast for you, and you can't slow it down. And Sam hit that point. Now you get to take a step back. He gets to learn. And if for some reason, unfortunately, he has to go back in because of an injury to someone, I think he'll be better prepared to be better when he goes back in than maybe he would have been if he would have stayed. So that was my big takeaway, Vince, is like for the first time since the Purdue injuries, I'm looking at this line and I'm saying, dude, I think they got a shot to be okay. And be like that 2018 offensive line where they don't blow people up. But as we've said all year, Vince, when you've got Jeremiah Love, when you got Ja'Jarian Price, when you have Riley Leonard, you don't have to be the 2015 or 2017 or even the 2020 offensive line. If you're just a 2018 offensive line and you just get a body on a body, let those cats eat, because they will, Vince. They will. And we saw that on Saturday. Literally, it just took Coogan throwing a guy 12 inches to give Jeremiah that room to go 64. I mean, I was encouraged. It was the first time all year I was like, you know what? I think this line has a chance to be able to hold up the rest of the year and then into the postseason even. And I hadn't felt that way since Pat and Billy got hurt. I mean, since Billy and Ashton got hurt. That was my big picture takeaway, Vince.
I'm just happy that the decision that was made when Billy was healthy again was the decision that was made. Because I was like, well, they're just going to put him back at right guard, and then Rocco's going to go back to the bench. Like that, honestly, that's what I thought was going to happen.
Yeah.
And so
which would have been a mistake because Rocco has outplayed
yes.
penalties he got in the
yes.
lineup.
100%. So it was the absolute right decision. I'm just happy that it got made. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like I wasn't confident that decision was what was going to be made. And when you told me, hey man, he's starting at left guard, I was like, oh, okay, let's see how this goes. You know what I mean? And so the left side just looks so much more confident just as a side than it has the last few games. They look more confident. They, and we'll talk about kind of the line games and stuff that Navy was playing. When I watched it originally, I didn't notice how many twists and stunts and slants and movement and everything that Navy was doing. I mean, they moved pre-snap on almost every single play.
Almost every play, yeah.
I mean, and they were doing twists and they were doing some every team calls it differently. One guy goes under, one guy goes over, et cetera, et cetera. They did that on almost every play as well. And they handled it pretty darn well.
For the most part.
It looked like they've done it before. Like that was the big thing to me. Like the way that they were passing it off and they were the communication. That's I think that's what I'm saying. The communication on the left side was so much better than it's been. And it showed. And I realized it was just one guy, but it made a difference. I think Anthony played better, and obviously, and Billy is better than Pendleton, and that's just, I mean, he's been there longer. He's just a better player.
Well, I mean, we've talked about this, Vince. He was their most talented starter when the season started.
Correct.
And once Jagasaw went down, Billy Schroff's your most talented offensive lineman.
Yep.
And I don't know that it was overly close, to be honest with you.
I agree.
And so you get him right. You get him back. He gets to play a game, and then because like you could even see it. And I was texting with a guy earlier, and he said the same thing to me. But you could see he was still a little stiff in his lower body, which like Josh Burnham was his first week back. Remember that? That's what Josh complained about, or my sources talked about when you looked at Josh. That first game back, he was still a little stiff. That ankle was still a little stiff, and that's what Billy had. So now he gets to play a game, and now you get to go, do further rehab, do more stretching. He gets to play more, take more reps, and he's going to be good to go.
Yep.
So that's you start seeing that, and you're like, okay, they got a shot. They got a shot to do this. So I'm actually looking at that 64-yard touchdown, right, Vince, right? So first of all, they started the play in a nod front, and there's a safety 10 yards off the ball. Right before the snap, they shift to basically two head-up guys, and the safety starts to creep down. And then at the snap, they basically slant. The DN crashes into Schrouth and Knapp, and the D tackle to that backside twists. The Mike linebacker crashes into the A gap, and then the safety flies down and he attacks the B gap. So they're double teaming the 1-2 technique, the Coogan and Spindler, and then all of a sudden the safety comes flying off, and the Mike does a late fire off of the run action. He sees Jeremiah getting the ball. He comes downhill. Rocco, I still think Rocco should have stayed on the on the defensive tackle. I don't think Rocco should have gone off to the safety. That's where I think the mistake was. But he did it aggressively. But then Coogan doesn't just leave for, sometimes you'll see guys, Vince, they're blocking, and then they're going, and they just kind of turn. Coogan was blocking here, and he went, and then stepped over. And that shove pushes the guy back, and Jeremiah cuts right behind him for the touchdown. So I was just watching that play, Vince, and wanted to recap that real quick. And I'll have this in the run game breakdown tomorrow at Irish Breakdown, by the way.
That's why you got to be on the boards, people. Boards.irishbreakdown.com. It's the only place you're going to get it. Just saying.
Yeah.
Just saying.
But yeah, Vince, you want to dive a little bit into the run game?
I'd say go ahead and roll us into the next part. Yep.
Okay. So run game wise, it was actually a very interesting strategy for Mike Denbrock. So I'm watching this, and I texted somebody, and I was like, "How much duo you guys running yesterday?" Because I'm like, "What's that?"
It was me. You texted me.
No, I texted you after I texted somebody over there.
Gotcha.
And was like, how much duo were you guys running yesterday?
Okay, gotcha.
Because I'm like, am I misreading this? Like, is this actually inside zone? And I'm like, because like normally, like their inside zone and duo looks very similar. They run very little duo. They run a little bit, but very little. And I'm like, I think this is duo. Next play, I think this is duo. I think this is duo. And so I sent that text, and it's like it was almost the entire game plan. And so you asked me why, and here's why I think it is because of how much pre-snap movement Navy did. Duo is a little different than zone because you don't have quite the same count. It's just double team vertical movement. It's just very much a vertical oriented run. And you get a push, and then you come off on whoever's coming into your gap. You know what I mean? And I think that was a way to deal with all the junk that Navy was going to throw at you. And then it just lets you get the backs downhill. And when you break down the game, Vince, Navy was loading the box a lot, but they did it in some different ways where they were bringing guys from everywhere inserting into the run game. There were times it looks like, hey, you're in a 5-6 man box, like a 5-6 man box, and you've got a tight end. Like this looks like a favorable run. And then all of a sudden, right before the snap, the linebacker outside the box comes inside. The nickel over top of number 2 comes down. He crashes off the edge, and then the other safety comes down and guards the slot guy. Next thing you know, it's a 7-man box against 6 blockers. Mm-hmm. Right. They were doing a lot of that stuff. And the offensive line, I felt, did not necessarily do a great job all the time of getting to the second level. I thought that was my big minus in this game is they did a decent job with the push in the run game, but they didn't do a good job getting off to the linebackers. And that's something I have to get better. But it was by doing this much duo, what they did is I don't know that they intended to sacrifice big plays. It was a byproduct of it because of the way Navy played. But what they did was, Vince, I mean, you saw the 64-yard run, but what they did was I think it limited the negatives. The way that they blocked duo in this game, Vince, with the extra edge, the extra gap on the edge, and you're running it kind of to that edge. It's a little harder for them to have the edge crashes, but then number 2, a lot of those games, they're going to be stunting right into the double teams, and they're just going to get a forward push. So just come off and go. Just come off and push. Just come off and push. Where if you're doing more of the inside zone against some of those looks and you're getting a fast swipe, some of those twists they're just going to be run-throughs. It's just going to happen. And so I felt the way that they attacked with duo, maybe it limited some of the bigger plays that they could have had in other instances. But Notre Dame, I mean, Navy came into this game, Vince, pretty decent tackle for loss team, and they finished this game with 3 tackles for loss. One of them was a sack. And that right there, it helped Notre Dame stay on. You want to know part of the reason why they were a really good third down team in this game? That's part of it, because they didn't have a lot of those negatives that really got them off schedule.
Getting behind the chains,
and I thought that was a big part. I mean, the 3 games coming into this contest, Navy had 8, 5, and 8 tackles for loss for -21, -29, and -33 yards. And in this game, they had -8 on 3 tackles for loss. And the tackles for loss were like -1 and a -2, and then the sack for -5.
I want to emphasize the point that you made about getting into the second level. When I was watching the film, I was like, and I'm watching it back, and I'm thinking to myself, man, 44 made a lot of plays because he was essentially unblocked a lot of the time. I just now went and looked at the stats. He had 15 tackles in this game. and his buddy, the other linebacker, had 10. So he had 25 tackles from the 2 linebackers.
Right.
And that's too many.
Now, and in duo, you're going to leave a linebacker unblocked.
Sure.
And the back has to make his cut, bounce, whatever off of that. But it was a little bit too much of that sometimes. Yep. They didn't get to either of them. You got to get to one of them and then let the back work off the other, right?
Exactly.
But that was also partly Navy. Sometimes they would get to both linebackers, and then there's a safety flying down, and you can't get to him. Like there was one particular play where Jadarian Price got stoned in the hole, and they got up to both linebackers, and then the safety comes down from 9, and he's right there in the hole before Jadarian could really get anything going to make a miss like we'd seen him make guys miss in the past. So, it needs to get blocked better, but they haven't run this much duo. But again, I do think because you said those 2 guys had 25 tackles. You know how many tackles for loss they had? Had a half a tackle for loss for -2 yards. That's it. The other 1.5 came from Luke Paris, who was an edge player, who had a sack and then had a play where they, like I said, there was a blown assignment. It was that early twist where they kind of got it wrong. But I think overall, I thought it made a lot of sense. It made a lot of sense for why they did what they did. I still would have liked to seen them mix up the inside-outside runs more. That's just always going to be my complaint. But it was actually, I think, a pretty savvy strategy, Vince, to go with more duo instead of inside zone because you could just be more powerful at the point of attack and just get a push. And that's why they were, even though they weren't getting a bunch of big runs, but it was like 4, it was 5, it was 3, it was 4.
Consistent, though. It was consistent.
They stayed on pace. They stayed on track. And then eventually you block it that one time, or somebody makes a mistake that one time, and it's going to be a house call.
Yep.
And that's what we saw them do.
You want to talk about the pass game next? Because I think the pass game.
Yeah. And we can be quick about it. We've kind of wrapped into this. I thought this was that is where I thought this offensive line was at its best on Saturday.
I could not agree more.
They weren't perfect. There was a couple run-throughs, but a couple of those run-throughs were just like, you don't have enough guys to block all those guys. And Riley's got to do something with it, and he did.
Except for the one play that he got sacked, but he was back there an awfully long time.
Like we said yesterday, that was a covered sack.
That's a covered sack.
You're as an offensive line coach, your coaching point to Billy and I think Knapp on that play is finish the play, finish the block. You came off late. Don't let that guy come off late and get to Riley. Yeah. But that's not on them. There's always, when things don't work, there's always coaching points. Don't lose that guy late. Stay on him. Stay on him. Stay on him. But their internal clock is thinking the ball's got to be gone by now, right? Or he's gone. You know what I mean? But Riley doesn't normally stay in the pocket that long. You know what I'm saying? But that's a coaching point. But that was more in the quarterback. He's got to dump that ball off to Devin Ford a lot sooner than that. Or take off running. That's the other thing is take off running. Do what you do. But I thought overall, Vince, it was very sound pass pro from this offensive line in the game. And again, I think a big part of it was this was probably the best communication and tandem work that we've seen from this offensive line overall.
I completely agree. And I know that, Mike Denbrock decided to do a little bit more max protect. He decided to do a couple of different things in that regard, which then in turn gave Riley Leonard some more time to stay in the pocket and do some different things. And then that in turn gave Riley Leonard more confidence to be in the pocket. And I texted this to you as I was going through the film. It's like, this was Riley Leonard's best game as far as his footwork inside the pocket, stepping up, shifting one side, shuffling one side or the other. I mean, it was
the ability to just slide step and keep his eyes downfield. Vince was really good. Normally when he slide steps, he's taking off or he's rushing the ball or exactly.
He looked incredibly comfortable. And I think a lot of that had to do with a renewed confidence in what was happening in front of him. Right. And part of that was because sometimes they kept a tight end in. Sometimes, it was a tight end and a running back. Mm-hmm. Like they were max protecting a few. There was one time, and we talked about this earlier on in the show, they had 8 guys protecting Riley Leonard, and he had all day to throw the football, right? And it allowed the 2 wide receivers that were on a route to get open. But it looked like a different team when it came to pass pro in this game, right? They were calling some longer shots as well, Brian. I mean, it was very clear Mike Denbrock had more faith in the pass pro this week than he has in the past. It was
also smart because the other thing is the reason the pass pro against this team is if they only bring 4, you're okay.
Sure.
But if they're going to bring all these other crazy things, you have extra guys to protect for it.
Yeah, made perfect sense.
And I thought the tight ends and the running backs did a pretty good job at handling that. And then it's up to, but that's why they ran some of the route concepts they ran too, is because you're running off play. Because again, they recognized very early, and they knew coming in this was going to partly be Navy's game plan. Is look, they're seriously playing the run, and when we saw any kind of run action, they're just flying downhill. And sometimes they're flying downhill just based off the formation. Yep. Even when Riley just dropped back to throw, they were still having safety stepping down. And they were there again. Their whole game plan was we're going to stop the run. So Denbrock felt like, hey, Coach Denbrock felt like, all right, let's take some shots on them then. If they're going to like on that 3rd and 6, they're thinking run game, they're thinking quick game.
Short,
that's what Notre Dame does. Yeah. And so Notre Dame took advantage and got the ball down the field. But that doesn't work. That game plan doesn't work if your offensive line doesn't give you time.
Correct.
And they certainly gave them time in this game to get that job done.
No doubt.
And so again, like, and look, is this a super talented Navy front seven? No, it's not. It's not a super talented Navy front seven, but it's been an effective front seven. I think I had them trying to look at the game, the breakdown that I did last week, Vince, and I don't have it in front of me, but I trying to find the stats. But Navy, I believe, was in the top 50 last week in
that going into the game, you mean?
Sacks. Yeah. Yes. Let me see. Notre Dame pass. Let me find it here real quick. Notre Dame pass offense versus Navy. So yeah, Navy came into this game ranked 34th in the country in sacks per game. That's not bad. Where in the point being that the last 2 weeks they did a solid job against Georgia Tech and Stanford protecting the quarterback. It's a solid job, not great, but solid. Those two teams stunk at getting after the quarterback, Vince. Like those teams were not good against. So you're like, okay, how are they going to be against somebody who's actually good at getting after the quarterback? And
right.
And when you look at those two teams now, Stanford right now ranks, let's see, 63rd in the country in sacks. They have 16 in 8 games. And Georgia Tech ranks 127th in sacks. And Stanford ranks that high because they've actually had 2 pretty good games since Notre Dame. So they have 16 in 8 games. Vince, 7 of them came in the 2 games since they played Notre Dame. They had 3 against SMU and 4 against Wake Forest. Coming into the Notre Dame game, they only had 8 sacks in 5 games. 4 of them came against Syracuse, who doesn't do a very good job protecting the quarterback. They had 1 sack in every other game coming into that. They're not very good at getting after the quarterback. So yeah, okay, great. You did a good job protecting them against that. This is a team that gets after the quarterback, not because they have great personnel, but because they have good scheme and the personnel plays their butts off. Because I mean, these are like Riley Leonard said it perfectly after the game. This isn't just another football team you're playing.
Exactly.
These are guys that are gonna, if God forbid we have to go fight a war, these are the guys fighting it so that we don't have to. And they're a different breed of young man, and they're smart, they play hard, and there's some good athletes out there too, man.
Sure.
They're just not the biggest, they're not always the strongest, but they're good. I mean, Carlos Ramos, the fact that a kid like that, who's 5'11", 205 pounds, he's as big as D3 linebackers, Vince, like guys that I coached.
Right.
But he had freaking 15 tackles against Notre Dame.
Exactly.
Because he's smart, he's athletic, and he's going to give you everything he's got, man.
Right.
And that's what this team is filled with. And I thought this offensive line handled that pretty well.
No, I do too. With everything that gets thrown at them, like that's a tough mental ask for this offensive line. And we've seen in the first 6 games where at times the mental aspect of being an offensive line is not always the best for Notre Dame. And that's even more of a reason that Navy threw the kitchen sink at this offensive line to try to get a couple run throughs and get some tackles for loss and do some different things. And yes, it occurred every now and again, but not enough to change the outcome of this game, and not enough to push Navy to where they needed to be. The offensive line stood up to it, and I was impressed by that. I was impressed. Now they can build off of this. Like, this is not where you want them to be in December, but I think, as you said, now we're seeing some pieces of, hey man, this line could be good. This line could be good. Right. And when you take in all the pieces,
good foundation, a good starting point for, hey, if they can build on this boy.
Right. I love the fact that there's a bye week this week too, because this is now a chance for these 5 to start gelling together. Because as long as there's no more injuries, this is the 5 that you're going to ride. So, let's get them figured out and let's get this thing moving in the right direction. So that's going to do it for our O-line talk, but we do have a few super chats that we want to get to before we get out of here. So, Brian, why don't you pull those up and let's roll through them. If you want to make a comment or ask a question, make sure you throw in a super chat. ND 92 and 57. Thanks for the super chat. Do you think the AP also do not want to be wrong when the college football playoff rankings come out next week?
I mean, I don't think you ever want to look stupid by having a rankings one thing and then the committee comes out and it's completely different. I think if they cared about that, they would have cared about that 2 weeks ago. Like, I don't think this is some grand conspiracy. I really think watching Notre Dame play this weekend and then watching A&M play this weekend and then saying, like, this Notre Dame team, like, outplayed A&M. It wasn't like it was a fluky game that, if anything, Notre Dame had a lot of missed chances to put that game away. We broke that down. I did a video on that. Like, if Riley doesn't make this read wrong, if he doesn't do this, there were so many chances for Notre Dame to blow that game open against A&M, and they didn't, because it was also their first game. But I think it was really just about, sometimes it's like, hey, guys, it's okay to take the win. Like, they realize, hey, we were wrong on this Notre Dame team. They're really good. We should jump them up in the rankings.
And I think the loss that Notre Dame had weighs on a lot of people for a lot longer than maybe is necessary. I do.
And you've stacked up enough impressive wins now where I think people are starting to get like, again, I think, I don't know if I said it earlier on the show or if I only said it to you, but like Nicole Auerbach had that tweet where she basically was like, I'm actually going to read the tweet because it was actually a smart tweet, even though as a football coach, I do not want them to at all move on from the win or the loss to Northern Illinois. But she had a tweet about Notre Dame. I'll try to find it here real quick because she apparently tweets a lot. I didn't realize how much she tweeted. But she said something about Notre Dame. And just give me a second, Vince. I'll find it here quickly because I know it was said yesterday.
Well, I think the dam broke a little bit on the people holding the NIU loss against Notre Dame. I think that dam broke a little bit. Not only seeing what A&M did to LSU, but also seeing what Notre Dame did to a ranked Navy team. I think all of those things combined kind of broke that dam a little bit, and people are like, okay, I think it's time
Here's what she said.
Hold it against them.
Right. After 6 straight wins, Notre Dame has now done enough to make up for its loss to Northern Illinois. The Irish have gotten better as the season has gone on, and the CFP selection committee should give them credit for that. And I think she doesn't say, hey, that game doesn't matter anymore. It was played so long ago. We don't count September. She's like, look, they've done enough. She's basically like, they've done enough to show that was a fluke.
Right.
That's not who they were. Look what they did before. Look what they've done since. That was just a freaking weird day. Now, it doesn't mean that you forget it. And that's because, again, if I were to say, well, you're just going to say we should forget that game. No, because otherwise, if you say they should forget that game or pretend it didn't happen, they should be ranked number 2 behind, or if not number 1 behind Oregon, or, either 1 or 2 with Oregon. No, it did happen, which is why you're not in the top 5. But it's like, but we're not going to continue to punish them and keep them down here at 12 and 13 because they lost to Northern Illinois. That mattered in games 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 because we were still kind of within that zone. But now after whooping Louisville, and they did whoop Louisville, they let that game was not as close as the final score. After whooping Georgia Tech, after destroying Stanford, after destroying Navy, you're just kind of like, you know what, guys, these guys are pretty flipping good. As long as we don't play them against a MAC team in the playoff, they're going to be really good. You know what I mean? Because the 2 worst games this year, in my opinion, came against freaking MAC teams. You know what I mean? But so that's my stance on that, Vince. I don't think it's a grand conspiracy. I just think it's they've look that they're not alone, Vince. There's a lot of Notre Dame fans who are still not over that win, and to a degree, we should be over it. I mean, it happened. You got to keep proving this. Sure, that's behind us, but you just can't let it to be the dominant thing that defines our season. And we're now getting to the point with 7 wins that it's like, okay, at 4-1, I get it. And how good is A&M really? I think that's part of it too, Vince, is like, how good is that A&M win really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, now they're both 7-1. We know that was a freaking great win because they just went and smacked LSU in the second half of this game, right? That win means a lot more now, and Notre Dame is just whooping teams now. Hey, guys, we're past that week 2 stuff. Like, this is what truly who Notre Dame is and not that team. And then super chat from Anthony Solomon. Thank you for covering the AP poll tonight. You're welcome, buddy. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, man.
Had a super sticker from Phil Frankie. Thank you, Phil, very, very much for that. We appreciate that as well.
Cal, thanks for the super chat. Will any players be coming back from injury before the end of the season? Well, Billy was the big one, and now he's back.
I don't.
And Rubio was a big one, and now he's back.
You're
Those
not
are the only two I can think of.
You're not getting Jagasol back. You're not getting Craig back. You're not getting Benjamin Morrison back. You're not getting Patojo back. You're not getting Boubacar back. And I don't think you're getting Kahano Kia back because he had a torn ACL. You're not getting Marty Auer back. He had a torn ACL. I mean, Mitch Jeter. That would be the one.
Oh, that's
Mitch
a big
Jeter.
one. It's a
real big one.
Yeah,
you'll get Mitch back at some point in time. That's a big one.
I would think. I personally, based on what I think I believe the injury is, I think after the bye week he'll probably be good.
I would think so
because it's rest. It's just rest with what he had going on, and he'll end up having almost a month of rest at that point. So.
Although he may get a lot of work again the next time they get back on the field. It's like, okay, it's halftime. We're pulling Riley and we're pulling Mitch. Okay.
You know what? PATs can be kicked, okay? So they can find somebody to kick PATs. I'm okay with that. And if it's a field goal, I want Mitch Jeter out there.
Yeah. Like Jason Onye won't be back. But his isn't an injury. So I don't see anyone else that's injured that is going to, like, Bronte Johnson's not going to be back. He's out for the year. At least he's not out for the year. He will be back at some point in time, but he's not going to then factor into things. So I don't think so. And then we got two more. This one real quick, and then I got another one.
All right, Connor, thanks for the super chat. Appreciate you very much. Thanks for the great coverage, gents. My daughter loves her IB onesie. Oh.
I'm just glad it still fits her, Connor. So
I wish
that's awesome.
I was part of IB when my kids were little, because we would have had a treasure trove.
You'd have had so much freaking IB gear for your kids. It's not even funny.
They still wear it.
Awesome.
My daughter just walked in the door. She's got hers on.
Which one, Chloe?
Mm-hmm. She wears it every night.
Sorry. My bad. Don't tell Kristen.
No, you're good. It's all good.
So this is a super chat from Luke Butler, and he said the super chat because he wanted me to address something he said that I thought was misguided. So this is what he said, Vince, and then I'll respond to it, and then we'll be done with the show. But thank you for the super chat, by the way, Luke.
Yeah, Luke says, unpopular opinion, great win. Always love to see a dominating win. However, I don't see this team to be a championship contender. Fundamentally not sound, coaching mistakes, and tons of youth.
Well, they do have tons of youth, but I don't think that's a bad thing. And I know that for the last 30 years, we've just been obsessed with Notre Dame being veterans, and the coaches were just like deathly afraid of playing freshmen unless they were just absolute freaks. Some of the best players on this team are young guys.
Yep.
They're better off at certain positions because of the youth. And so that's number one. Number two, fundamentally not sound. At certain positions, that's still an issue, sure. But the defense is not at all fundamentally unsound, despite its youth. They're a very sound defense, which is why they're arguably the best defense in college football. They're in the conversation to be the best defense in college football.
Yep.
The fundamentals up front on the offensive side of the ball have gotten better and better each week. They're still not where they need to be. And then coaching mistakes. Again, show me a team that hasn't made coaching mistakes. I just think, Luke, you're number one. You're improperly holding Notre Dame to a standard that you're not holding everyone else to. And what I mean by that is it's not about, the championship standard. No, it's like if you're going to have a standard for what it takes to be a championship contender, then that needs to be applied to everybody. And I've watched Georgia play almost all but two of their games this year, and they are more fundamentally unsound and have more coaching mistakes than Notre Dame does. Some people don't think that because they only watched them play against Bama and Georgia, or against Bama and Texas, or only Texas. But trust me, go watch the Kentucky game, go watch the Mississippi State game, go watch the Auburn game, and you're going to get a good sense of some of the issues that Georgia has right now. Go watch Texas play. Go watch Texas barely beat Vanderbilt this weekend. You know what I mean? Go watch Texas get punched in the mouth by Georgia the week before. Guys, I just watched Ohio State barely beat Nebraska at home with a true freshman quarterback. And honestly, I thought Nebraska kind of choked that one away a little bit. I thought Rule made a terrible coaching decision to not take the field goal in the third quarter when they were down 14-9. I get it. You're trying to get a touchdown, but bro, you're probably not holding Ohio State to 0 points the rest of the game. You're going to need more than one score. You're not going to get a 2-point conversion, a touchdown, a 2-point go up 17-14 and win the game. So you're going to need multiple scores, right? So take the 12 there. You're still in the third quarter. And then when you got that touchdown later in the game, all of a sudden now you're maybe going for a 2-point conversion to make it 20, get yourself to 20. And now on that last drive, instead of being down 21-17, or even if you don't, you just go for 2 and you get or 1 and get 19. Now all of a sudden Ohio State's up 21-19, and all you need is a field goal. Your play calling changes dramatically on that last series. So, and as Michael Koster just pointed out, the same team that Indiana beat by 49 the week before just almost beat the Buckeyes at Columbus. Oh, they're looking past, to Penn State. All right, fine. Okay. Notre Dame hasn't looked past anybody. You know what I mean? So, like, every team in the country is flawed this year, number one, Luke, and that's my biggest thing. But I think fundamentally not sound is a dramatic over-characterization of the entire team. There are certain parts of the team that are not always fundamentally sound, and we address those every week. But I'd be saying the same thing if I was addressing A&M. I'd be the same thing if I was addressing Georgia, Alabama, Texas, Ohio State, Oregon, all of those teams. And so, I just coaching mistakes. Again, everybody makes those. So is Notre Dame a championship contender? In most years, this team would not be a championship contender. In most years, let's be honest about that. In most years, this team is not competing against 21 Georgia. They're just not. There's too many injuries. They've lost too much. But there is no 21 Georgia right now, Vince. There is no 2020 Bama in college football right now. There is no 2019 LSU. There is no 2018. There's no 2018 Clemson. There's no 2018 Bama. There's no 2018 Oklahoma. And there's probably not a 2018 Notre Dame in college football this year, Vince. You know what I mean? So, yeah, when I look at it, Luke, I think you're selling this Notre Dame team short based on how they're playing now. Because here's the thing. Your resume is indicative of your entire season when you're talking about rankings and the playoff rankings. However, your team right now is what it is right now, not what it was 7 games ago. You know what I mean, Vince? And so, yes, when looking at Notre Dame's resume, you should hold the Northern Illinois game against them to a degree. That's why you don't rank them number 2. You don't say, hey, the last month, nobody's playing better than Notre Dame except this team and this team and this team, and that's it. So let's rank them 4th. That's not how it works because you can't ignore what happened in weeks 1, 2, 3, and 4. I always hate when people do that. But when you're talking about how this team stacks up against everybody else, it's more about how they're playing now. Now, do they need to continue this and prove that they can do this week after week? Of course. But I'll say this. If Notre Dame plays the rest of the year and into the playoff, the way that they have the last month of the season, Notre Dame can play with just about anybody based on how those teams have played over the last month of the season.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of Georgia the way that Notre Dame's playing right now and the way that they're playing. I'm not afraid of Alabama. I'm not afraid of Ohio State. I'm not afraid of Oregon. I'm not afraid of Texas. I'm not afraid of Tennessee. I'm not afraid of a rematch with A&M. Can those teams also beat Notre Dame? Yes, they can.
Yeah, 100%.
But can Notre Dame play with all those teams? Yes, they can. Now, my question is, can they win 4 in a row? That's going to be tough. But part of it's matchups and who gets knocked off. But is this team have the ability to make a run and play with anybody this year? Yes, this year, because they're not the only team with flaws. Right. Everybody's got flaws right now. Again, if you want to feel better about Notre Dame and so they can't play with the Ohio States of the world, all right, cool. Spend the next 2 hours after this show watching the Ohio State game against Oregon and then watch the Ohio State game against Nebraska yesterday. And tell me that this Ohio State team is just, man, I just don't know if Notre Dame can compete with those guys. Tell me that offensive line is going to be able to do anything against this Notre Dame defensive front 7. And I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to tell you the answer already. It ain't great. It ain't great. So can Ohio State beat Notre Dame? Of course they can. But can Notre Dame play with Ohio State? You bet your bottom dollar.
Absolutely.
And that's my whole point. They can play with a lot of people this year.
Yep. That I agree with. But let's get there. That's the goal. Let's get there. Let's enjoy the bye week.
They got to continue this. But right now, today, this team versus how everybody else is playing, yes. Now, in 3 weeks, Vince, they may not be playing like this. They may be playing better. They may be playing worse. But right now, this Notre Dame team, and I don't care how people are favored. You don't give me all the favored crap. I don't care about that. Remember, Notre Dame was favored to lose to Texas A&M.
That's true.
I don't care about that. I don't care about that. I don't care about how they're playing. Don't give me, what Vegas would say Ohio State. They should say Ohio State should be favored to win based on history. But that doesn't say anything about who these teams are right now. I don't care how Georgia would be favored against them right now. I don't care.
Notre Dame was
Georgia was favored to blow out
13.
Kentucky. Wasn't Georgia favored to blow out Kentucky? Wasn't Georgia a road favorite against Bama, or was Bama favored to win that game? I can't remember that. But Texas was favored to beat Georgia by almost a touchdown. How'd that work out? I don't care about that stuff.
Yeah. Well, Notre Dame was favored by 13.5 yesterday, and they won by 37. So
there you go.
Just saying. So anyway,
I don't care about all that. That's it, Vince. That's the last one. So, Luke, I appreciate you bringing that up, and I just think in this particular case, I think sometimes we as Notre Dame fans, we'll debate, Vince, and I know we'll run after this. I watch fan bases of other teams, and they are so blind homers about their team. Like, they refuse to see anything bad about their team. And then I watch a big chunk of Notre Dame fans just will give their team credit for nothing. And I just don't understand that. I really don't understand that. We did have a late super chat from Joe Papiti. Very happy with the win. I'm loving the O right now. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate you, man. I'm picking fly fishing out of Pepper. If I'm picking fly-ish out of Pepper, I could be worried about the efficiency of our run game, but I'm just happy as heck that the team is really starting to cook. I'll just say this, Joe, real quick. Part of the lack of efficiency is because teams are focused on stopping that. And good teams are going to be able to keep that in check a little bit. And the last two teams they played are pretty good run defenses. And they did a pretty good job of running on those teams. So, it can get better, but they make up for it with being a very dangerous big play offense.
Right.
Very dangerous big play. And by the way, Virginia Tech, who's a pretty good rushing team this season, who came into this weekend averaging 200 yards a game, ran for 99 yards against Georgia Tech this weekend. The team that Notre Dame went for 168 on. So, you know what I mean, Vince? Like, sometimes context can tell you a little something, my friend. Can tell you a little something.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. Well, that is going to do it for this edition of Upon Further Review. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us for a little IB After Dark. Make sure you hit the like button, the subscribe button, the notification bell, share it with your family and friends. And, of course, jump on the boards, boards.irishbreakdown.com. There'll be video analysis put up there in the next 24, 48 hours. We will, of course, have our afternoon shows, the evening shows. It's a bye week. We might even have a
special show that we introduce this week. I'm not 100% sure on it yet, but we might just have one.
Well, I don't want to get anybody too excited. I don't want to get anybody too excited, but stay tuned. And you know how you figure that out, Brian? Number one, being on the boards. And number two, hitting that notification bell, because it might be a show at a random time that you just don't know. It won't be random to us, but it'll be random to you. You'll know if you hit that notification bell. Just saying. So, hey, everybody, thanks for hanging out with us. Really appreciate it. We will talk to you tomorrow for sure. We've got IB Nation Sports Talk at 5 o'clock. Sean and I will break down something. There's no press conference, but we're going to talk Notre Dame football. We're going to talk all kinds of, I bet you we talk about the AP poll. Guarantee that happens. So we're going to have a lot of fun. So we'll see you guys tomorrow, and we will talk to everyone real soon. And thanks for hanging out with us at the Irish Breakdown Podcast. For Brian, I'm Vince. Have a great night.